Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region. This is Brandon from Free State, Colorado. I'm about to get started here soon. So much to talk about. I have tons of links going over what's happening with this primary election this year. We're going to talk about the DSA insurgency. We're going to talk about unaffiliated voters and how they're influencing this race. We're going to talk about so much stuff here, looking at some of the political pundits online, some of the ballot returns, so much stuff. We have incredible guests joining us tonight as well. So I'm just sharing the link out there. Please like, comment, share. Let's get this out there to people so they can come and join us. We're going to have a lot of fun just chatting tonight. And yeah, it's going to be wild. And I'll be watching the chat too to see if there's any thoughts that people have about this election and any predictions that you have. Love interacting with the chat. It's one of the best parts of YouTube. So please let me know if you have any thoughts of what's going on in the chat here, but we'll get started here just shortly, getting all the links shared out to everybody. And that way I can close some of these windows that I got open. And yeah, tons of stuff to talk about. So it's going to be a lot of fun, but please invite people into the chat. And yeah, hope you're having a good week so far, Colorado. This is Brandon from Free State, Colorado there. And yeah, you may know me from online social media or on YouTube. Do a legislative live stream every week during the legislative session. But there's just so much happening with this primary election. I really wanted to get this information out there, and a lot of great friends who have some good insight and some good information to share what's happening. So we're going to dive in here. It's 8 o'clock. Our first guest is going to join us at 8:15, and that is going to be Lesley Hollywood joining us at 8:15. And then we're going to have Jason Bias join us at 8:45. We're going to have Ron Hanks join us at 9 o'clock, maybe some other people as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of good information for everybody. But yeah, I hope you're doing well. Ballots, if you didn't know, it's too late to turn in your ballot. So make sure you drop it off or go vote in person like so many of us do. But hey, Cozy Cameraman, good to see you. Not sure who you are, but I'm happy you're here. Thanks for joining. Got a tons of stuff to talk about tonight. So much happening. If you haven't seen my previous videos, I did a deep dive a little bit into some of what's happening here with the DSA insurgency in Colorado. I think that's one of the most interesting topics of this election cycle, of course. We've seen this in other states. We've seen this in New York, and we'll go through some of this. I did talk about it on a previous video, but there's so much more information, so much other stuff to bring it out there. Hey, Jason, thanks for jumping in there. Don't live in Colorado, but each day we're getting hosed with the DSA candidates. Yeah, this is happening across the country, folks, and it's absolutely wild. It's crazy here. So there's this decision desk. I got a lot of links pulled up here I think are really interesting here. So I don't know. Please in the chat, tell me what you think. Oh, Cozy Cameraman, I know who you are. Awesome. Good to see you. I don't know that many cameramen. So good stuff there for sure. And so this is crazy. Decision Desk HQ previews Colorado's June 30th primary. Can the left keep winning? Can the left keep winning? Hey, Sonny, thanks for joining. In Colorado Congressional District 1, Dem socialist Milot Quiros is challenging Representative Diana DeGette. So what do you think? Please tell me in the chat. Do you think Milot Quiros, this DSA candidate who has very strong beliefs about a lot of things, is challenging Representative Diana DeGette? Poll from a pro-Quiros group. And that's what you got to remember too, folks. Like all these polls, who's paying for these polls, right? And sometimes they're not going to release them unless they have favorable information for their candidate, right? So they'll be like, okay, yeah, this poll came out, but how many polls didn't come out? That didn't go their way until one finally comes out. That's the right way they want it. So they found Quiros is up 41 to 36%. DeGette's allies have spent most of $2.4 million in this final 2 weeks. Now check out this spending, folks. We haven't really seen this, right? Denver is crazy. And the thing is, Diana DeGette is like one of the most progressive congresswomen, right? She's totally progressive. She's pushing all these crazy agendas, but that's not why they're primarying her, right? Like, people who are on the conservative side, you're like, and we'll talk to Ron Hanks tonight, who's primarying a congressman, and I would say Jeff Hurd deserves to be primaried, right? Because he is totally a Democrat light, pro-authoritarian, pro-big government Republican. But on the left, it's a little bit different. Diana DeGette is as progressive as they get, but I mean, don't get me wrong. The Kuros people think that DeGette isn't progressive enough. They think they should be further to the left, which is absolutely crazy. But also, I think the DSA, more importantly, they see an opportunity, right? They see an opportunity here in Denver because it is the strongest Democrat district in the state. Look at this money. Look at this money coming in, folks. This is the last couple of weeks of the election, $2.4 million in outside spending. So this is PACs, this is IECs, this is other groups out there. Hey, great to see everybody in the chat. Hey, Melvin. Hey, Phil, good to see you. Thanks for jumping in. We got a lot to talk about tonight. Awesome. Good to hear you. Good to see you here. But look at this. Pro-choice majority action, $1.5 million for DeGette. Justice Democrats. So this is this new progressive group, and they're not new. They've been around for a while, but $500,000 for Kuros. Mile High Accountability Project, which of course is just a made-up name that some big Democrat donors made. They want to keep the status quo, right? And of course, I think there's a lot of concern about Milot Kuros and her anti-Israel statements, you know? I think that's a reality out there. Project 218, 400,000. So look at this lopsided spending. So that's what's so interesting about this, folks. You see so much of the big money and the power brokers in the Democratic side supporting Diana DeGette. But it's this upstart. I mean, these young people, they don't vote though, right? That's the big thing. This post has 28,000 views. It says Kuros trounced DeGette 67 to 33% at the district convention, though DeGette still made the primary. And that was one of the biggest news stories this year, right? Diana DeGette almost didn't make it to the primary election, right? If just a few more people would have showed up for Kuros or not shown up for DeGette, we wouldn't be having this debate right now. Party gatherings tend to be unrepresentative. That is very true. Denver is pretty progressive. 44% of CD1 is white with at least a 4-year degree, 6th highest in the United States. Very interesting stuff here. So what do you think? I think DeGette's still going to win. I don't think Kuros can do it. I think it's going to be close. Don't get me wrong. I think the DSA and all of these far left people are making some progress, but those people don't traditionally show up to vote like the older demographics do. And I think Denver Democrats are some of the more establishment Democrats who've been around for a long time. And DeGette's been their person from day one, you know? DeGette's been there forever, so they don't know who Milot Kuros is. I think the outside spending is going to help DeGette, but will be very interesting. I mean, look at this. This was the district assembly, right? This is what Diana DeGette almost got knocked off for. And I mean, you got to think, look, it's only 79 people, 157 people. So sure, this was a big news story, but we're only talking about 236 people earlier this year. So I don't know. I still think DeGette's got this one. I think DeGette's going to win. Of course, you know, people are asking in the chat about Bottoms or Marks. You know, Bottoms, Representative Scott Bottoms did a recent interview with him. He is our most pro-liberty legislator in Colorado, one of our best proven track records of pro-liberty. But he's had trouble fundraising. He hasn't been able to raise a lot of money, which is interesting to see, you know, being this grassroots candidate. Marks has all the money and national support, and he's actually putting billboards up and being able to run ads and mail that Bottoms isn't able to compete with. So it'll be very interesting to see. But of course, the big question there is what's going to happen, right? Because if you have two more conservative candidates, and a lot of people say, well, Marks and Bottoms might split that vote, giving Barb Kirkmeyer an opportunity. I don't know. I don't think there's enough excitement or energy around Kirkmeyer. I don't think she's going to win. I think that it's between Bottoms and Marks is my personal thought. And Lesley Hollywood's going to be joining us in about 10 minutes. And I think she has some incredible information about the ballot returns and what this means for the governor race. So hold your questions. We got tons of great guests coming on tonight. Pour yourself a drink, you know. With Colorado politics, sometimes you need a beer, have a drink, and let's talk politics. We'll be here for a while. Got some great guests. I just got confirmation of another guest. I got to send him the Zoom link, so that's going to be really exciting. I'll announce that here shortly. But I don't know. I think Bennett's going to pull it out, folks. I think Bennett's going to win. I think Kaken-Looper is going to beat Julie Gonzalez. I think the closer one is going to be that Milot Kuros versus DeGette. I still think DeGette's going to win, and I could be wrong. It'd be a huge upset if that happens, but I think the establishment Democrats are going to win. I think the money's on their side. I think the people who normally turn out to vote in those elections are their demographic, but it'll be very interesting to see. Of course, Manny Rutnell and Shannon Byrd, that's the other big one in Congressional District 8. I mean, Shannon Byrd is the more establishment candidate. Manny Rutnell is definitely the more far left candidate. They're all far left according to me, right? I mean, according to you watching this, you're probably like, they're all communists, they're all socialists. We all hear that. Don't get me wrong. Oh, appreciate that. I love Free State, Colorado. Thank you, Sonny. Appreciate it. Yes, KC Eagle flies. Yes, DSA is already here. That's true. They are here. Monica Campbell says no Democratic Socialists in Colorado. Yeah, I wish, you know, we got to put in the work to get them out of here. That's for sure. Gordon, smash that like button. Hey, appreciate that. Good to see you, Gordon. You're always a regular during the live streams during the legislative session. Hey, Forest Mommy, great to see you here. You want DSA to win to help get Colorado to rock bottom faster. You know, that's interesting. Do you guys agree with Forest Mommy there, saying DSA should win because then Colorado gets to rock bottom faster? And I mean, really, if you have more far left candidates winning, we're probably going to see more bounce back, right? You're going to see that pendulum swing the other way. And I'm going to share these links in the chat, folks, so you can check them out yourself. I have too many windows open, so I'm going to share these and then get them out of here. Make sure you follow, subscribe, comment, all that. So check this out, people. Diana DeGette is getting trolled hard. Look at this. Super secret dark money, gosh. Personally delivered a thank you check to Representative DeGette. Look at this guy who's DeGette staffer at this little pride parade. Look how mad he is. He pushes them, tries to grab their camera, and they're going after DeGette. This is young, youthful energy. Grassroots Democrats, these progressives who are fighting against the establishment, and they're talking about the dark money supporting DeGette and this and that. Interesting to see. So there's this huge insurgency, folks, and it's not good, right? We really need to ask ourselves, why is this happening? Why are all these progressive, far left people gaining traction, not just in Colorado, but across the country? That is a serious question. We need to figure that out, and we need to be able to answer it. We know a lot of it's due to affordability, right? People are having trouble affording to live. A lot of young people don't see opportunity in the future. They don't know how they're going to get a good paying job. They don't know how they're going to be able to afford a house, how they're going to be able to raise a family. They don't see a bright future ahead for them. So they're looking for somebody to upset the apple cart, right? They're looking for somebody to give them that answer of what can be done. And they're turning to the socialists, and that's not good. That's not good. And people have to realize, if we believe in liberty and freedom, we need to be able to talk to these young people and show them that capitalism, private property, free markets, all of these things are how we're going to make a wealthy society, how opportunity is created for individuals to have their own businesses, their houses, their families, and have good jobs. But ultimately, until we do that, folks, the Democrats are still going to be doing it there. So yeah, I thought this was crazy. There's so many posts out there. And of course, you know, I've been looking at this stuff, so my algorithm is totally skewed. AIPAC, huge deal, right? Huge deal. Julie Gonzalez, no money, rejecting the Israel lobby money. This is one of the biggest stories of the Democrats. This is one of the biggest dividing issues. Go on on Free State Colorado Facebook and X. I just posted a video I did kind of highlighting some of the recent instances that really show how the Israel issue is one of the dividing issues in Colorado Democrats. You know, you have John Hickenlooper, $596,000 from pro-Israeli PACs. And these people say Sunrise lies, right? They're getting indirect dark money as well. Yeah, I believe it, right? That's the thing too. These DSA people, I've seen a lot of posts today about Neville Singham today. We're seeing this, always people are talking about George Soros, but the far left are getting this dark money as well. So it's not just the left versus the far left issue. You know what I mean? That's what it comes down to, but it's interesting stuff for sure. In Denver, we're seeing this really insurgency. So check this out, the Colorado Working Families. Now, they are a dark money group supported by New York money, but this is their little voting guide. So it's interesting, folks. We need to look at what the far left is doing here in Colorado. We need to know what they're saying and where they're at, because if we want to do something about it, if we want to turn the tide towards liberty and freedom and create a free state, we really need to know. Yes, Gordon says, got to stay informed to fight the commie socialist Democrats' reign of terror. Yes, we do, 100%. We need to know what's happening. We need to see it, right? And we got to look for opportunities, folks. We got to look for opportunities to drive that wedge on the Democratic side to really divide them. And Israel's one of those issues, economic issues, you know, this full-blown communism that they're pushing. So just to give you an idea, folks, this is the Working Family Party. These are the far left progressives, right? Look who they're pushing. Look who they are pushing. These are the people that need to be defeated in November, right? And it's very interesting. We're going to talk about some of these races and how big they've become. But, you know, we're seeing some huge money being spent in these primaries. I'm going to get into that later. We got a lot to talk about, but you can see the state legislature, the far left progressives have their agenda here. These county races, folks, we're seeing hundreds of thousands of dollars being spent on Arapahoe County commissioners, Adams County commissioners. Oh, you Jeffco people are going to love this. Of course, they endorse Andy Kerr for Jefferson County assessor. Does that guy just feel entitled or what? Right? He just wants a permanent political job. He was county commissioner. He was state legislature. If you don't know Andy Kerr, he was one of the far left legislators before they started calling him far left. He actually is this lawsuit. He sued to repeal Tabor in Colorado. This Andy Kerr guy. I know I'm pronouncing it wrong there, but Bad stuff. Of course, this is the far left progressives. They're pushing for Julie Gonzalez against John Hickenlooper, Milot Kuros against Dana DeGette, David Seligman for Attorney General. I don't think he has a chance, folks. I don't think he has a chance at all. They're saying Amanda Gonzalez for Secretary of State. I don't think she's going to win. It's going to be Jesse Danielson. Um, State Board of Education and CU Board of Regents. So very interesting to see these far left progressives and what they're pushing. This is Lisa Calderon. She ran for Denver mayor as this progressive. Oh, excuse me, Dr. Lisa Calderon. But what's interesting, she posted this earlier today. It's only got 300 views. So I don't know if X, are you guys seeing this? Is X and Facebook shadow banning people because of the election? You know, that's a reality, right? We see this happening. Oh, she turned off comments too. Of course she did, right? Like a lot of these good Democrats do. But I'm sharing these links in the chat. Check them out. This, do you guys see this Adrian Felix guy? He is a far left progressive. Gosh, he is as bad as they get. But he has been fighting with Alan Franklin, if you know him. These Democrats are eating each other, folks, and they're going after each other. And you know, I do have to agree with them. I think Jenna Griswold's going to win. I don't know if Segelman's even going to get second place for Attorney General. But I want to see what these far left people are saying and seeing the fighting within their own party. And this guy says, it's been a long time since I felt hope. This guy's a DSA guy. And of course, I've muted Deep Sing. So it's been a long time since I felt hope. The truth is, Dinah DeGette will try and keep the seat until the day she dies. It's up to us to take it back. Milot will. But you're seeing this energy, right? You're seeing this youthful energy of the people on the far left. You have this Deep Sing Badesha guy and all these other DSA progressives who feel like this is their moment, right? They feel like this is their opportunity to make an impact here in Colorado. And I just don't think they're going to do it. I don't think they have the money. I don't think they have the ground game in the organization. But you know what? I could be wrong. Supposedly they're knocking thousands of doors. Dinah DeGette right there, look, $1.6 million from pro-Israeli PACs. And of course, Milot Kuros is not going along with that. But you got to be thoughtful about this, folks. I mean, there's a lot of Jewish people in Denver who are maybe don't want Milot Kuros to win, right? If she's that anti-Israel, that's going to scare a lot of these moderate establishment Democrats, especially some of the older ones. And we might see them not support her and come out in droves for DeGette, especially that older people. So it'll be very interesting. Very interesting to see. Check this out from Drop Site News here. Colorado Democrats are increasingly worried that a progressive wave similar to New York's could reshape Tuesday's primaries, with establishment candidates facing unexpectedly competitive races, according to Politico. So this is going to be, the whole national media is paying attention to this, folks. They're not paying attention to Democrat versus Republican in Colorado. They're paying attention to far left Democrat, DSA, versus establishment Democrat. A Democratic strategist familiar with private polling told Politico Senator John Hickenlooper is in a dead heat with State Senator Julie Gonzalez in Denver. Okay, maybe in Denver. Maybe in Denver he's in a dead heat. But I still think Hickenlooper is going to win because that's statewide. That's statewide, right? It's a U.S. Senate seat. It's statewide. I think Hickenlooper is going to beat that one. I don't think Julie Gonzalez will win statewide. She'll do well in Denver, Boulder, maybe some of the progressive areas, maybe not even Boulder. Let's be real. Boulder's become an the retirement home for the progressive Democrats, right? A lot of old people there, and they don't necessarily want to see Julie Gonzalez win. That's my opinion, at least. Politico says DeGette's campaign has been alarmed by internal polling showing the race tightening within a margin of error, prompting millions of dollars in outside spending to bolster the 30-year incumbent. Dropsite News has newly reported that AIPAC funded and big tech-backed super PACs are pouring millions into this race. It's not looking great. One Democratic strategist with DeGette's polling told Politico, it's very tough when you're fighting against a wave. Politico report allies of Senator Michael Bennet also acknowledge his race for governor against Colorado Attorney General Phil Weiser is far closer than expected, with private polling showing a much tighter contest than anticipated. So I don't know. What do you think? Do you think the far left is going to win in Denver, or is the establishment with all of their money and all their power going to make a difference? I'm sharing these links in the chat. We have our first guest joining us tonight, folks. One of Colorado's best Second Amendment advocates, Rally for Our Rights. So many great organizations. We the Second. We got Lesley Hollywood here. Lesley, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Brandon?
Hey, good. Oh, I love your dog in the background there.
Yeah, they like to sleep up here, so.
Best seat in the house, I'm sure.
Yes, definitely. She's like, what's going on over here?
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking time to join the live stream tonight. We got a great crowd in the chat. A lot of people here. We even got our favorite cameraman in there as well. And
Oh, hello,
yeah,
cameraman Bill. That's who
But
I
yeah,
assume it is. That's our favorite one, right?
yeah, definitely. That's what I'm assuming it is too. But no, really appreciate you taking the time. I can let you share your screen if you want, or I can share anything you want me to share if we want to talk about these ballot returns. I got the ballot returns from today pulled up.
Okay.
Um,
Um, yeah, I don't have much. I don't have anything pulled up. I've been working honestly, doing work for some primary candidates. So we've been obviously we're in the final stretch here. So that's so we've been pretty busy. But yeah, I don't know. I actually have not caught the first 15 minutes of the show. So what did you cover?
oh, just talking about the DSA insurgency and kind of talking about the election in general. So,
Okay.
I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about how the ballot returns are could influence what we see in tomorrow's election results. So, what are you seeing? What are you seeing with the ballots that are being returned, and what kind of does this show what we might expect?
So I think it's really interesting, and maybe it's because I'm a woman, but I am really proud to say that I actually called this before ballots started coming in. I think it was probably about 6 weeks ago, maybe even more, 2 months ago, as we were moving into this primary election. One of the things that I said, just kind of analyzing it strategically, thinking from a how do you win, how do we, when you're looking at moderates versus grassroots, like how do we actually get in there and shake things up with that? And so one of the things I think we always need to do in that case is look at the landscape. What do these elections look like? Who's else is on the ballot? What else is going on? And so one of the things that I thought was interesting was that this is the very first um, interesting Democrat primary ballot that Colorado has had in probably almost 10 years, really since 2018 when Polis was elected initially. And if I remember back to 2018 properly, it was really, even that was kind of a boring race because was dumping millions of his own money into it. He was running, gosh, I'm trying to remember her name. Her last name was Kennedy. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, the school board or school
Yeah,
lady. Yeah, I know who you're talking about. I think she's a state senator as well. My goodness,
I can't
I
remember
can't
either.
remember, but I know who you're talking
So
about.
even that wasn't that interesting of a primary. There really wasn't that much going on the Democrat side. And since we allow unaffiliated to vote in either primary, one of the things that I have found over the years, when you kind of get outside the political echo chamber, is when you actually start talking to more moderate unaffiliateds who do participate in the primaries. I have found that it's not like it's anything nefarious. What it really comes down to is that they get to choose a primary to vote in. So they always vote in the more interesting one, right? And, a lot of the unaffiliated I know who are more moderate, who kind of bounce back and forth or they have some considerable thought that goes into which primary ballot should I fill out. It's not because their principles or values sit a certain way, it's because they can, and one's more interesting than the other. And for years, the Republican ballots have been more interesting than the Democrat ballots until this year. So, one of the things that I've kind of leading up to this election was really, really thinking might happen was that we would see massive, massive Democrat turnout for the Democrat ballots. So not Democrat voter turnout, which I think we're seeing, I'm sure, high turnout there, but just really that these unaffiliated who are participating in our primaries would be choosing the Democrat ballot this time because of no other reason that it's more interesting that they have so many more races over there. When you get over to the Republican side, we've got on the few House seats and a few state Senate seats, there's some, competitive primaries, but outside of that, we really just kind of have a lackluster election this year. We've got one candidate for state or for U.S. Senate. On the Democrat side, we've got Hickenlooper being challenged by Julie Gonzalez. We on the in the governor's seat we've got Michael Bennett and Phil Weiser, and although I don't find them a whole lot different, to be honest with you, one of the races that I have seen a lot of unaffiliated say they felt that they needed to vote the Democrat ballot was actually the Attorney General's race over there. So I've seen a lot of just very moderate unaffiliateds say that they really don't want to see Jenna Griswold win that race. Therefore, they felt that was the most important race to vote in this year. So looking at this, what we have on the Democrat side, it has I think resulted in what we're seeing right here, which is that we have massive turnout of unaffiliateds returning these Democrat ballots. So the real question I think that begs, honestly, it's going to be interesting because now for the first time, the Democrats are going to be like, oh, well, maybe unaffiliated shouldn't be able to vote in these primaries. Maybe we should close these primaries because they're going to feel some interesting heat over there. I think that there's a likely chance. Well, so there's a really good question I have about what are these unaffiliated Democrats voting for? Are they voting for the more moderate candidates? Because we have, like you were saying, the DSA, these very extreme sides are in these primaries, or are they unaffiliated voters who are choosing to vote for these DSA candidates because now they have a choice? So that's going to be an interesting thing that we're going to see when the results come out. There's going to be some answers, and it will tell us something about the electorate, in my opinion. Um, the ones that I have seen making the choice to vote in the Democrat primary are doing it because they want to see the more moderate candidates elected. That's literally why they're doing it. But what's going to be interesting, though, is that these same voters often vote the Republican ballot. They probably have in the last, I would say, four elections, four primary elections that we've had. And now all of a sudden, like those voters are not going to be influencing, they're not going to be putting any weight into what's going to happen on the Republican side. So I really question, are we going to end up with a very lean conservative vote on the Republican side when you don't have your unaffiliated to kind of flip-flop with whatever way the wind is blowing, and you've got solid people who are principled voting in the Republican primary? Where is that going to, what will the results of that be? And I think that's going to be really interesting to watch. My I hate to say this because I hate to be wrong, but if I was to predict what I think was going to happen, I actually think that this is going to be good for our more grassroots candidates.
Yes, well said. I got it pulled up on the screen here, people. You can see so unaffiliated voters right now. This is as of this morning. So this is through the weekend. Now, there's still 94,000 in process. This is Secretary of State's reporting here. But 146,000 of the unaffiliated voters. So right now, 783,000 unaffiliated voters have voted. 146,000 ballots for the Democrats. Only 63,000 for the Republicans. So Lesley, you definitely called it. You hit the nail on the head there. For the unaffiliated voters, the Democrat primary ballot is much more interesting, maybe much higher stakes. Of course, thinking Colorado's a blue state, and they're thinking who wins the primary is probably going to win in November, right? And that's just the unfortunate reality for so many of these statewide seats, at least. So they say, well, why should I vote in the Republican primary? Because that candidate maybe doesn't have as big of a chance, for one. And then for two, like you said, the candidates are very interesting on the left, right? We have some far left extremists, as I talked about earlier, and we're going to continue to talk about throughout the night. But we also have some of the more moderate mainstream candidates who've been around for a long time who maybe have kind of seen some of that or kind of built some loyalty to their voting base, and some people are maybe showing up to say, hey, I want to support that candidate. I don't want to see some far left progressive DSA insurgency come into Colorado. So I don't know. It's interesting here, but look at this, folks. For everybody, all these Republicans who are complaining about an open primary, most of the unaffiliated voters are going towards the Democrat side. So I think, Lesley, you mentioned having a lean Republican vote. So you're really leaving the unaffiliated who are the more conservative ones, right? Who are the ones who have a vested interest or real serious thoughts, right? Real passion for maybe one of the Republican candidates, and that's who they're voting for. Otherwise, they're probably going to vote Democrat. So very interesting to see. I'd love to hear what people think in the chat there
Well, and I
about
think
this. Yeah,
too,
go ahead.
the other thing too that when you remove these kind of wishy-washy unaffiliateds who, again, I go back to, like, I know a lot of them that kind of just choose which ballot they want to based on literally interest, right? And it's because they're super moderate, and honestly, it's because they're kind of unprincipled and they don't have values that they don't have value. They have values. I shouldn't say that. people I care about, obviously, but they don't have values that drive the way that they vote. And so when you look at what's happening right now, those people are all just choosing the Democrat ballot, which leaves the people in the including the unaffiliateds that are voting Republican. Those are going to be your people who identify with Republican values. They care about the Second Amendment. They care about Tabor. They care about parental rights. And so the fact that we now have we've like removed all the fat and we've just got these value voters. Like, what are value voters going to do on this ticket? We're going to find out tomorrow night. And I think it's going to be very, very interesting. And I don't know, Brandon, I sent you some pictures, some screenshots earlier. I don't know if you can pull those up because I sent the two screenshots I sent you were this exact same data from 2024's primary and then 2022's primary. So people can actually see how different this is. Um, because it's to me it was wild. I actually had to, not gonna lie, I get these emails, the one that you were showing here, I get those every single day. So I always know what's going on, but I get them for every election. So I've been doing this for years. I've been following this data for years, which is probably why I could kind of predict what I thought was going to happen. But I went back and I was like, well, I don't have any previous data saved. So I used ChatGPT and I asked it, can I find this data somewhere else? And it like searches everything. And it's like, yes, here you go. Jenna Griswold has it for you. So I was able to, come up and find these. And I could probably screen share too, if that's easier.
Sure, yeah, definitely. I'll let you be
Let
the host
me,
here,
okay, let's
and you can
see.
screen share. But yeah, it's very interesting. I'm very curious. But also look at this real quick, folks. Look at, and of course we know it's the older demographics who are voting as well. We see this, the age brackets here, 64 plus, 65 plus. So the biggest voting demographic right now in Colorado for that kind of 9 year or 10-year span is females 65 to 74. And that is your high propensity voters, female 75 and older. But this is what I'm saying here. Look how many young people aren't necessarily voting. You got 25 to 34. I know the screen just went away, but there's a lot of younger people who aren't voting the same way that the older generations are. And that's what kind of makes me think that the DSA types might not be as successful here in Colorado. I don't know though. I don't know. There's still 24 hours to go here, less than 24 hours. Wow. Who here is happy to be done with the primary? I think we're all going to be very excited and very happy to be done
I
with the
plan to sleep
primary.
in on Wednesday. Okay, I'm going to share my screen.
Go for it here.
Let's see. Okay. Okay, so this is the graph you were just looking at that you were just sharing. This is the exact same graph from 2024. So this was just 2 years ago. And if you look at this, you can see here. And again, so I want to, for anybody that's watching, it's really important to understand this is not Democrats and Republicans. One, this is all only unaffiliated voters. And this is the ballots they're returning. So they're returning a Republican ballot or they're returning a Democrat ballot. So this is excluding Republicans and Democrats in which the party people are actually doing. This is just a look at unaffiliateds and how they're choosing their parties. So in 2026, this was like a mirror. So this was the day before the election, which was that other data you were just showing. And so we had Democrats, 78,265 had returned. Unaffiliated had returned a Democrat ballot. 64,159 had returned a Republican ballot. So not very far off, right? Like nothing like what we're seeing right now. But now you want to see what's even crazier. This is 2022. So this here is the same picture. Of course, they changed the colors, but this is the same thing. So Republican ballots in 2022 were actually 30,000 more, or like 23,000, 24,000 more. So unaffiliated in 2022, what was happening in 2022? It was our last governor's race. So this was the
Yep.
last governor's primary that we had, right? So that's why they were all choosing the Republican ballot was because that was the governor's race. 2026 was a little boring. I mean, sorry, 2024 was a little boring. We didn't have really any like exciting top of the ticket stuff. Our presidential primaries are done separately from these primaries. So to me, this shows like basically what's happening. I mean, even this is even a bigger spread that we're seeing that's going on with the Democrat primary with unaffiliateds right now. And so what happened with this primary? We ended up with Heidi Ganahl, and nothing against Heidi or anything, but that's how that ended up shaking out. So, and then of course we just had Jared Polis on the other side. But I will go ahead and stop my screen share.
No, it's very interesting stuff, especially when you go back to 2022, when you go back to 2024, we're really kind of in uncharted territory in some ways in terms of how unaffiliateds are breaking for the Democrat candidates this year.
Well,
And,
and if you
there's
want to, so if you want to, now that people have had a chance to look at that, if you want to pull up the current one from today again, and you can see how dramatic this is. So I mean, I find it really fascinating because I track voter stats really closely. And so one of the things too, like if you pull up that whole email that came in from Jenna Griswold earlier today, starting at the top, one of the things that we're seeing here too is if you kind of zoom in on the line graph there, so right there, one of the things that we're seeing, so the dotted line at the top is going to be 2022. So that was those Republican ballots. And so this is all Republican ballots, all Democrat ballots. And so this isn't just unaffiliated, this is everybody combined. So we see how high. I mean, that Democrat line is crazy. I've never seen it that high. That's insane. And these are all compared to the same day in the past. So we look at the dotted Republican line, that was 2022, I believe. Dotted Democrat line, also 2022. And then you can kind of see now where that solid red line is. And that's actually was quite low up until probably the past, I don't know, 3 days. And now all of a sudden that's starting to bump up. So it will be interesting to see tomorrow. And these do continue to come out after the election until all ballots are counted. So I always track it to the end just because I'm curious how it looks at the end. But it's going to be interesting to see, does that red line go way up tomorrow? Are people voting in person today and tomorrow, or just all the ballots coming in late, just like they usually do? One of the other things that I kind of questioned was kind of going back to like before ballots came out and before we could start tracking this data, was I was a little bit curious what if we would see what I was kind of referring to as a Victor Marx bump within the Republican Party, because I continue to be very kind of fascinated, honestly, by the Victor Marx whole phenomenon. And it's nothing for or against him. So this to me isn't about support for Victor or anything. It's about just looking at what's happening with that campaign, because I try to get out of my echo chamber and kind of get a pulse on what I consider the people, just your average people out there who don't live in the political echo chamber. And the number of them that I have seen that are voting in primaries for the very first time in their lives because they want to vote for Victor Marx um, is really interesting. Like I'm honestly, just the other day, I was chatting with a friend who I happened to run into in town, not a political person at all, knows I'm political, but not somebody I know through politics. And at the end of our discussion, he was just like, "Hey, he's like, how do I have a question for you? You know politics." He's like, "When is it that I vote for Victor Marx?" Right? And I was like, and I was surprised. Like this was like a just your average blue collar dude, just somebody that doesn't watch the news, doesn't pay attention to any of this stuff, but he just wanted to know, when do I vote for Victor Marx? And it's to me, and not religious either. This wasn't out of a church. He had never heard of him before this election. So there's something that's happening within that campaign that's reaching voters who have never been politically engaged before. And I do think no matter what happens, people can think whatever they want about Marx, but I do think there's kind of a phenomenon that to me, I'm fascinated by it. Like, where are they attracting these people? Because they are voting in primaries for the first time. And that's another thing. These unlikely voters are another thing, in addition to this unaffiliated kind of flux that's happening here. Those are also people who can really, really dramatically shape primary elections.
Well, Leslie, you bring up such a great point too. In politics, we always wonder, how do we get people off the couch, right? How do we get people to show up? How do we get people to vote primarily, but even just to volunteer, to donate, to contribute, to show up to a city council meeting, to show up to a political event? I mean, that's one of the biggest questions we have. And I think especially on the more pro-liberty side, we're always looking for answers and looking for solutions to get people more engaged. And so, like them or hate them, that doesn't matter. The interesting part of the conversation that you brought up, and I'm very fascinated by it as well, is Victor Marx having an effect of getting more people engaged who wouldn't otherwise get engaged? And that's a great question. I don't, we'll know the answers. We'll know more, of course, after tomorrow. But just based on social media, it seems like it, right? It seems like it. But in politics, the answer is always usually maybe. So maybe that's happening. Maybe it's not. But even folks here, just take a quick peek at this. This is party registration. And we see that of the Democrats, 52% of Democrats have turned in their ballots, or 52 of the ballots returned, excuse me, are Democrats. And this is registered Democrats. This is not unaffiliated here, where 35% of them are Republicans. So it just seems, and obviously there's more Democrats than Republicans, don't get me wrong, but the numbers aren't entirely off. Let me pull this up here real quick. I've been tracking this for some months now, and I'm going to continue to track this. So this is as of June 1st. And I know it's changed a little bit. It's constantly changing. But in Colorado, we have 1 million active registered Democrats and 910,000 active registered Republicans. So when you really think of it that way, it's relatively close, right? When we're talking about some of these numbers, we can kind of see how close that is. So when you think of a million versus 900,000, and then you look at the ballots that are returned so far, where Democrats, 400,000 have been returned, and on the Republican side, only 277,000. So maybe there's a Victor Marx effect, but I almost wonder too, Lesley, and I'm curious what you think about this. I'm almost wondering, there's been so much negative press, think about Nine News, think about some of our mainstream radio hosts, some of these other people out there. There's been so much negativity around Victor Marx. There's been negativity around, Scott Bottoms. The media wants to attack him. And, and be fair, Barbara Kirkmeyer is not that exciting. So are the Republican voters being almost depressed in some way? Is there going to be a little bit of an undervote on the Republican side because there's not a clear front runner in a way, right? Because there's so much trepidation might be the right word on some of these Republican Party people who said, I don't know who to vote for. And maybe that's why they're a little bit delayed in terms of coming in. And that's why they don't have the same kind of enthusiasm that the Democrats do. I don't know. What do you think?
So I think again, part of it has to do with how interesting the ballots are, right? So why are Democrats turning out at such a large rate? Because they have a really, really interesting ballot. Like honestly, if we had a really interesting ballot, we'd probably see the same numbers on the Republican side. We don't have an interesting ballot. We've also had zero like voter contact from unless you live in one of these seven districts where the astroturfed, IEC is coming in and targeting these very specific state house races. If you live outside one of those bubbles, like you wouldn't even know that there's a primary going on. And, I live outside one of those bubbles. I live in Johnstown and HD 64, Scott Slaw doesn't have a primary, thank goodness. And, there's really nothing super exciting besides this weird governor's race that is very weird. The attorney general's race, which I don't really hear a whole lot about, but otherwise, like, is my ballot exciting? No. But on top of that, I've received literally zero mail, zero. And I've just recently started seeing Barb Kirkmeyer ads on Hulu. Kind of a very lackluster, vote for me for I don't because I'm conservative ad. It's very weird. Um, Very lackluster ad, that she's got running on Hulu. I see a lot of attacking of the different candidates on social media, which obviously is, disheartening if you want to try to figure out who to vote for. But I haven't gotten a single piece of political mail this primary, which you're literally your highest propensity primary voter because I'm a Republican and I vote in every election, like literally every single election I vote in. So I would be top of your list. This person can be, we want to get her vote, right? So it's weird to me that the only other thing I've gotten was actually a very well done text message that I got from David Wilson that wasn't obnoxious, and I actually appreciated it because I learned something about him. He's running for attorney general, and so I did get that text message. So that was actually probably the most impactful piece of primary propaganda I've gotten so far this year. A lot of people seem like they aren't even aware. Like if they don't live in the political echo chamber, they're not even aware we're having a Republican primary. They just keep talking about Bennett and Phil Weiser because that's all the ads they see on TV. You open up Facebook and everything you see is, if you live in CD8 where I do, it's Manny Rutnell ads. I will say my 18-year-old who will be voting, who did vote in the off-year election last November, will be voting in this like actual real election this year, is getting tons of Democrat mail, actually. As an unaffiliated voter, our mailbox is full of Democrat ads for my 18-year-old unaffiliated, which is interesting because that tells you what Democrats are doing. They know that those people can be influenced. Republicans don't even know they exist, it seems like. So,
Well,
but
well,
yeah, so I think it's interesting kind of watching the all the different numbers and kind of questioning what's compelling people to vote.
Well, sure. And I think part of you brought up the money, right? We're not seeing a lot of spending on Republican candidates from Republican candidates, especially the statewide level, and for the governor's race specifically. But they don't have the kind of money the Democrats do, right? So you're talking, this is, so I just pulled up Tracer, folks. This is the Colorado Secretary of State's campaign finance website. This is where everything's recorded. Now, not everything's going to be in there right now. There's campaign finance reports due later today or due today by midnight. So everybody remember, if you're a registered agent, make sure to get that in there. But take a look at this. Rocky Mountain Way, that's the pro Michael Bennett super PAC or IEC that's funded to the tunes of millions of dollars by Bloomberg and all these other out of state East Coast interests and environmental interests and things like that. They spent, this is just since Friday. This is Friday to today. So if you want to see why, this is one piece of the puzzle, I think, Lesley, where the Democrat spending is really driving some of the turnout and they're much more aware of what's happening. Look at this, $37,000 on June 26th, $35,000 on June 26th, $48,000 on June 26th. I mean, this is all within one day, and these are different line items to different companies. $19,000 here on June 26th, and this is all for Bennett. So the ads and the text messages and the mailers, all of that kind of stuff's going crazy. Fighting for Colorado's the Phil Weiser one. They spent 25 grand on that IEC supporting him. And then, of course, we see, some of these other groups out there, the Protect Our Vote, Denver Progressives United, some of these dark money funded groups. But I think to your point, Lesley, a lot of this money is being spent on the Democrat side, especially on the governor's campaign. And we always talk about down ballot, right? So some of this stuff at the top of the ticket drives some of that turnout at the down ballot. So we're seeing outsized spending on the Democrat side. Of course, Colorado's got more Democrat voters. So there's a lot of little pieces to the puzzle here, and I think it's really interesting. And Lesley, I want to invite another guest on here. So let's, I'd love to, I don't know if you've ever met Jason Bias. He's running for House District out 54, I believe it is. Yes, out in Mesa County and Delta County. I got my map back there is why I'm looking. But he's
It's Matt Soper's district, right?
correct. Matt Soper is no longer running. He's term limited, which I am thankful for. I'm not a Matt Soper fan. He's went after our CORA, our Colorado Open Records Act, some of these other bills there. I won't put Jason on the spot about Matt Soper, but Jason, happy to have you here. I don't know if you. This is Lesley Hollywood, a great political analyst and consultant and everything politics, 2A advocate. But Jason, thanks for joining us tonight. How's the campaign going?
It's going good, we're at the tail end of it. Well, tail end of the beginning part, I should say. And we're just so happy we've gotten this far. It's been by the grace of God and Him alone. And yes, we put in the work. Yes, we've organized volunteers and supporters. But at the end of the day, He anoints leaders, just like He did with the Kings back in the day, and just like He will with House District 54.
Very interesting for sure for your candidacy here because you're in a tough primary. You're what I would say, in my opinion, Jason, I've interviewed you and definitely people check that out. I'm going to share your website in the chat here. But I believe you're the pro-liberty grassroots candidate. And I think you'd be a great voice for liberty and freedom if elected. But I'm not so sure about your opponent. I think your opponent's kind of backed up by these dark money establishment groups. We've seen a lot of money being spent against you. Not to put you on the spot or anything, but any thoughts on that?
So a lot of the negative ads that are running, it's really disgusting on how they've been attacking me. They pulled out like stuff that happened when I was a teenager. And of course, I'm only 26 years old, so I don't have a lot of things for them to look at really. And since I've been an adult, I've met my wife early on. We got married and together when I was 19 years old, had children when I was 19. The only thing that they can really use against me in my adult life is the fact that I dropped out of college at 19 so I can raise my family. But then I went back to college and graduated with my degree, brought Turning Point USA to the campus when I decided to go back, and then gave the youth, right, their platform to speak out on conservative ideologies and faith, family, and freedom in the most liberal institution that there is, and that's college.
Very interesting stuff. Lesley, any questions for Jason? I'd love to hear your perspective as because you're kind of helping some of the grassroots pro-liberty candidates as well. So I'd love to hear what your experience versus maybe what Jason's seen at Mesa County.
Yeah, so it's been interesting. I'm working with two candidates in particular, Nancy Rumfeld and Loveland, who I've actually known for gosh, I've known Nancy for a very long time. So I was really excited when she jumped in that race because I know she would be awesome at the Capitol, and I do a lot of activist work at the Capitol. And so excited about that race. So obviously jumped on board to help her. And then I'm also helping with Bob Davis over in HD 44 running against Anthony Hartsook. And I kind of got pulled into that, into helping with that race for two different reasons. Well, one, I really like Bob Davis, actually. I sound surprised, but like some people are like, who's this newcomer? And I'm like, actually, he's a really cool guy. Like, I'm actually excited to see Bob Davis get elected. But Anthony Hartsook ran some gun control this year. And I write a lot about when 2A stuff, 2A infringements come in or pro 2A stuff. I just write about 2A stuff in Colorado. I do a lot of activist work. So it's been interesting. So of course, with what Hartsook's done, I really would like to see Hartsook go. I don't think he deserves to continue to hold a Republican seat. Anyone who runs gun control as a Republican needs to go in Colorado. So I'm excited to see him get kicked out of that seat. But it's been interesting kind of helping these two races. And then all of a sudden, you've got the Colorado Conservative Leadership Fund to just come in and like just, I shouldn't say out of the blue because I've seen this same tactic used in Colorado primaries against Republicans before. So I kind of knew something was going to happen, but it really just came in and dumped. And it was just interesting to see, um, like the fact that they picked these races and it was like, having to like talking with Nancy about it when it was first starting that like, this isn't about you, Nancy. It's not about your race. This isn't about Loveland. This isn't about Matt Soper's district. This isn't about Douglas County or Parker. This is about something much bigger than that. So that's been really kind of fascinating to watch. And I've kind of been watching what's happening over there. And it seems like, in my opinion, like I'm watching what like the 48-hour expenditures by the Colorado Conservative Leadership Fund continue to come out daily. And they continue to put more and more money in there for your opponent, which is interesting to me. I'm curious if you feel like that's because they think you have a chance at winning or like, but every time I look there, it's like the other day, it's like, oh, more text messages for Nina, more canvassers for Nina, just her. So I was curious kind of how that's looking on the ground over there.
So yeah, they have been paying canvassers out here. Our district is being spammed with a lot of her ads, advertisements via flyers, mailers, social media, YouTube, TV, etc. And honestly, the reason why they keep spending the money is because we are winning and we will win. We'll win tomorrow. And that's why the expenditures keep increasing and increasing and increasing. And this is very similar to what the CEA does with school board
Mhm.
candidates, right? They'll spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. And, it actually worked in Mesa County this last year. They flipped our conservative school board back to a middle of the ground, right? Half liberal, half conservative. And it worked in that sense. But that's also, you have to keep in mind, that's all of Mesa County. So you get a lot of the liberals from the downtown Grand Junction area, as well as the rural communities. The rural communities, they kind of sat on their hands because we just won a presidential election. And so turnout in the off season was way different. Um, we keep getting surveys in Mesa County, specifically about me and my primary opponent. And I think that's how they're gauging on who's in the lead, right? Based on the feedback. And obviously we know who's paying for it. That makes sense. And then that's also why we see the increased of expenditures towards my opponent for that specific reason. But this race specifically is changing hearts and minds. And we've ran a clean campaign. I haven't ran a single negative ad about my opponent. I've never said anything bad about her. And I refuse to do that. I refuse to let people who are supporting our campaign IEC do that as well. Obviously, I don't have the full capacity to say no, but I also have the full capacity to accept help if I want. Obviously, they have to reach out to the candidate. A candidate has to fill out a form before they even start going through the endorsement routes and then the funding routes. Um, And I've made it very clear to a lot of these people who have filled out their candidate questionnaires, I'll accept the help, but understand that I don't represent you. I represent my people and my communities. If you have a problem with that, go find a different candidate. Um, and there are some organizations out there like Rocky Mountain Gun Owners that accepted that. They're like, no, that's quote unquote based. And I love them. I actually had to Google what that word means, because I may be 26, but I have kids and stuff, so I've been out of the game of slang for a little bit.
Mm.
Um, but we're in the lead, and that's what this money is saying. The more money that we see spent working against us, the better we are doing. And the negative ads they've ran have only helped our campaign
Mhm.
because obviously I'm not the same person I was when I was 16, 17 years old. None of us are, right? Um, and then also, why are we so focused on the past when we should be focused on the future? Right? My campaign has been clear on what I want to do for Colorado: lower the cost, protect our gun rights, protect our parental rights, put parents' decisions in the curriculum decisions when it comes to public education. Maybe go to the voucher system if we're going to fund it. Right? Obviously, I'm not super fond of the voucher system because anytime you put government money to a situation, there's always strings attached, right? But at the same time, if the strings are attached already, at least parents get to have a say on where their money's going. We pay the taxes anyways. We should have a say on what we're going to spend it on. Um, and that's the bare minimum. Obviously, I think there needs to be a lot of reforms when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to education, etc. But this is rural Colorado. Rural people want to go to work, they want to work hard, they want to come home, kiss their wife, eat dinner, go to bed, and do it all again the next day. They don't want to see the nasty flyers. They don't want to see the spam ads. They don't want to get a text message every single day, sometimes twice a day, on who to vote for. Plus, they did all this after 7,000 votes were already counted in this district. So horrible timing on Colorado Conservative Leadership Fund, which is super naive that they call themselves conservative when it's Democrat funded. I think that's just their way of being able to target Republicans and think that they're actually going to do something. But we hate dark money. We hate dark money. We hate candidates that are accepting dark money, especially when it lowers the other candidate's character and credibility. You should be focusing on what you can do for your district and then leave it to the voters and leave it up to God because he'll determine it.
Yeah,
Yes, I,
go
I,
ahead.
I just, so I was curious, when you look at, and I don't know how much, I mean, I know you've talked to Brandon a bit, but when you look at the donors that are coming into this Colorado Conservative Leadership Fund, which is, I'm going to be honest, I've been involved in Colorado politics at the state level, federal to state, every local, everything, for about 15 years, maybe even longer. And this is honestly one of the grossest things I've ever seen. When I say gross, it's because I'm a value. I have values and I've got principles, and that's what drives my activism in politics, which is rare to be like that, anymore. So I look at all of this Colorado Conservative Leadership Fund, this IEC, and them coming in and literally trying to buy candidates, to buy elections. And I was wondering what you think of like what the donors are thinking. I'm just curious when they're coming after you, right? There's something about you they don't like, right? And it's what is it? What is that they don't like about you that makes them want to buy your opponent?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's the fact that I'm a little bit of a younger candidate. And, we always say we need youth, but same people that are saying that we need more young people involved are also the same ones that say, no, wait your turn. Like, it's not your time yet. I've just been that kind of individual that's like, okay, if not now, then when? And if you're going to tell me that, then you're a hypocrite. Get out of here, you brood vipers. Um, and I call it how it is. Like, let's be honest, Colorado is in shambles right now when it comes to taxes, when it comes to rules, regulations on businesses, when it comes to family orientation and who actually determines how your family is going to run when the cost of living is so high, when your children are being indoctrinated in the schools, when we teach that boys can become women as long as you want to play with a doll one day. We'll go ahead and pay for the surgery as well, too. Um, I call it how it is, and that's literally, I think, the issue that they have with me. They say, okay, he may be young, but he's got his head on the right shoulders. We need someone who's malleable, someone who we can give a check to and say, hey, we want this passed, and they'll do it.
Mhm.
They'll fold. I'm
Hmm.
just not that candidate. And they've seen it throughout the campaign. They've seen it throughout the interviews. They've seen it in the ads that I've done. And, people call me a, a far right individual. But here it is I've stayed true on my principles. When the left keeps on going more and more and more left, I refuse to go to the middle and continue to be a middle of the ground. No, I'm going to stay strong on my principles. You guys can go left. I'm going to stay where I am, and I'm going to advocate for faith, family, and freedom. Tyler Sonnenberg, I think, is the leader of Colorado Conservative Leadership Fund. I could be wrong on that name. I could be mispronouncing it. But from what
No,
I've
you're.
heard,
I think you're thinking of Tyler Sandberg, who is one of the consultants paid for by. He has Timor Strategies. He's a
yes.
Ready Colorado guy. This and that. I know he's one of the groups getting paid. Axiom and Timor and some of these other groups are getting paid by that. No, but Sonnenberg. There's Josh Sonnenberg is the Young Republicans guy, Jerry Sonnenberg's son, former state senator.
Yeah, I'm
Not
definitely
involved
talking
in
about
Colorado Leadership Fund, right? Yeah, not Sonnenbergs are not part of it. Sandbergs are.
Sandbergs. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So I definitely was butchering the name right there. But I know he hates the endorsements that I've got. And that could be one of the reasons on why they're swaying towards my opponent. But I've also never got a questionnaire from them. I've never sat down with any of the organizations that fund Colorado Conservative Leadership Fund. Um, and I think the reason that they don't even give me the time or day is because they know that they're going to get the answers that they don't want. Um, and that's going to prevent them from backing us or giving any money to us. And again, like I said, the money keeps pouring in and pouring in and pouring it in because the voters are sitting here saying, we've had enough. We're done.
And just for people out there who haven't seen it, I've done some work tracing the money here. So there's this group out there, the Colorado Conservative Leadership Fund, and of course, I know people watching this are savvy enough to know that just because they call it this doesn't mean that's what they're supporting, right? But you can see in my mind, they're going after opposing all the grassroots pro-liberty candidates across in the Republican primary here and supporting the rubber stamp establishment Republicans that they want. And you can see the money here, folks, and they got $1.6 million that I saw so far, and they've spent nearly all of it. And it's these groups, as dark money groups, Kent Theory, Ben Walton, who's donated a lot of money to the Democrats before, Ready Colorado, who you said, we know Tyler Sandberg's connected to that. American Conservative Fund, $250,000 they dropped. They're entirely funded by gambling companies out of Washington, D.C. And very unfortunate that we see Colorado State Shooting Association selling out to do this as well, in my personal opinion here. But yeah, it's very interesting, folks. We're seeing tons of money. And so there is a real split, and I think hopefully people are seeing this, that there are grassroots pro-liberty Republicans, and they're not always supported by the big money, right? Usually it's the opposite. So very
But
interesting stuff. Yeah, go ahead.
and why are they supported by, why is it different? And I think that the number one thing is honestly, it just comes down to the lobbying, the lobbyists down there. They need to make sure that they have people elected that will bend to their will. And when they don't, they're going to make sure that the people who are running against them are out of there. I mean, it has absolutely nothing to do. One of the things that was kind of interesting looking at that and Ready Colorado and Tyler Sandberg is that, like, you can look at Nancy Rumpfeld's race in HD 51. Nancy is a sitting school board member. She has twice been elected, the only conservative in that district. She has twice been elected to the school board. And she has always just stood on principle. Like, she's not crazy, she's not radical. These are my principles, and I just don't apologize for them. That's what she's always done. She has actually worked with Ready Colorado because Ready Colorado is supposedly about education. So she has actually done stuff for Ready at their request because they asked her to come in as this conservative school board member and do this stuff. Then you look at Ready Colorado, what they're doing right now, and it's like they put in, I think it was $250,000 into that fund. Tyler Sandberg is the president or he's on the board. I think he's the board president of Ready Colorado. And they also turned around. So then Ready as the president, so Tyler Sandberg as the president of Ready Colorado has approved $200,000 into this Colorado Conservative Fund. And then if you look to see how much his companies have received from this, it's the same amount of money. So he literally, as the president of Ready Colorado, donated money to them and then turned around and paid it back to himself to go after school board members. And Nancy's not the only one. Matt Alexander is also a school board member.
Interesting stuff. We have another guest joining us, and Lesley, Jason, stay on as long as you want. You're welcome to be here the whole night, of course. Obviously, we're gonna have more people joining us throughout, and we have Ron Hanks. Ron Hanks, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Brennan. How are you, sir?
Hey, very well. Thanks for joining us. How are the wildfires going in your part of the state there?
Boy, we have a bunch of them, certainly up there on the Utah-Colorado border in Mesa County, and that one proved fatal, as you may know. Three firefighters lost and two seriously injured. Uray's got some troubles, and down in Pueblo as well, there's a 4,000 acre fire or so burning right now that's evacuating towns of Rye and Colorado City. So, we've got to rethink how we're managing our forests here. And that's something I've come out big on today, certainly, and that we can't just be offering condolences to these lost firefighters. The federal government has to get involved in improving the process so we aren't just throwing men and women at the problem. We need to be managing these forests so it doesn't get to this level. But thanks for asking. It's a tough summer because we don't. It's hot, dry. The winds are 45 miles an hour out here, and yeah. So we expect to see more of this, but we'll get through it.
Scary stuff for sure. But how's the campaign going, sir? How's everything on the ground as well?
Well, good. I think we have made tremendous inroads in this CD3 race. The I wouldn't be running if the guy was a conservative and was doing his job and actually representing. Uh, you know, but he's a 59% conservative according to Heritage Action, and he's left people standing in auditoriums waiting for him to show up. And we call him never seen, never heard. And we think a lot of this is his own doing has brought on the animus because now he has a record. See, I did run against him, as you know, Brandon, in 24. It was a six-man race, but only five of us ever showed up. And it wasn't Jeff Hurd. He was the guy that he just relied on those liar flyers to come in from Americans for Prosperity and sell him as a conservative. Well, now he's got a record, and now we know he's a co-sponsor of the land grabs, 730,000 acres in Gunnison, and of course, he's a co-sponsor of that with Bennett and Hickenlooper, and that's a bad place for a so-called conservative representative from Congressional District 3 to be. They've got their eyes on 1.2 million acres altogether. So, I mean, really, to be candid with you, the guy is so bad he's making the case for us. And if he were a conservative, I'd be applauding him. But he's not. He's a pay-to-play politician, a New York lawyer, getting the DC big money, and that's who he is. And he comes back and acts like he needs the voters. And as soon as they vote for him, he'll go back and serve the masters of the DC money and the New York legal teams.
So interesting, and there's definitely a common thread here. The candidates that Lesley's working with, of course, Jason as a candidate, and
Right.
yourself, sir. We're seeing this dark money pour in by these big institutions. Trying to basically buy some support. Buy a rubber stamp. If you ask me, that's my personal opinion here. But I just want to mention in the comments here, we got Taylor Tribe saying they are in House District 54. We voted for Jason, as did our neighbors and friends. So there you go, Jason. You got some votes out there. Taylor Tribe also says vote Hanks. And then we got Jeremiah saying here, the Forest Service is not servicing the forest. It has to be managed responsible. Logging would have prevented or limited most of the fires. Donald Lovejoy says Yellowstone actually does controlled burns instead of preventing fires. They started doing that after almost losing the park. And then
Yeah.
Beth says yes to Jason by his heart. And then you got Just Jimmy here saying heard the turd, basically, with a vomiting emoji there. So But very interesting stuff. People in the chat, if you have any questions for anybody on the live stream tonight, definitely jump in. But yeah, very interesting stuff for sure. So interesting to see so much dark money being spent here in Colorado, trying to really determine who's going to be on the ballot, which Republicans we're going to be able to vote for in November. So interesting stuff for sure. Anything, Ron Hanks, that maybe is surprising or anything that people need to know that maybe they haven't heard before?
Well, I've made the point. I'm 32 years in the Air Force. I would have put in more, but my shoulder gave out on me, and so I'm. When I got out of the service, I decided to ask, what more can I do? And so I ran in the state house. I was pro 2A, ran a couple of bills, constitutional carry, and to limit the magazine, to repeal the magazine capacity limit. And those are the things I want to bring forward. But real quick, Brandon, with all these fires going on, it reminded me my very first bill that I drafted and introduced in the state house was to get water tanks pre-positioned out in rural areas that had high fire risks, and did not make it through the wickets because it was a near super majority of Democrats. But the concept is solid. There were Democrats interested in it. If I make it to DC, that's going to be a priority as well. And, with all these fires going on and with the water waste that we're seeing, I want to bring President Trump out to CD3 and have a conversation that says, these are our problems. This is what we can offer you. But we have got to get these fires under control where we aren't just dreading another fire season and evacuating, and everybody's living in motels waiting for the word that they can go back to their homes. And last thing, and then I'll stop here for a sec. But my brother lost his home about 4 years ago to a wildfire, and so I went out and helped him clean it up and then dig it back out. And the point of telling this story, and I think it's important for the more of the radical left environmentalists. I'm not trying to disparage them, but we all know where they are. They know where they are on the spectrum. When you have these wildfires that are burning at 1,000 degrees and 1,000 acres, wildlife can't evacuate from that. If you go in and thin and harvest some trees, you are taking some of their environment. When a wildfire comes through, you're taking all of it. And when we were out there, we were cleaning up deer carcasses, rabbits, squirrels. They had just burned in place as they're trying to run away. We've got to make this argument that there's better management than just watching it burn.
Definitely, yes. Well said, sir. Lesley, any questions or thoughts or comments on the discussion here? You're
Nope.
muted there.
Um, Yeah, with the fires, I think that forest control and fire mitigation is just so important. I actually used to live in Northern California, where we would have just wicked fires every year. And I saw today the fire outside of Pueblo is so bad right now. They're pretty much like, if you have livestock, just cut your fences. And in all the fires I've seen here in Colorado, like, it's probably happened where they've said that, but I've never seen them say that since I lived in California. And I remember when they would say, if you've got horses, cattle, cut your fences. And I've actually like helped rescue horses, out of people's cut fences because they were freaking out and things back in California. So when I saw that, I was just like, man, it's just wicked. And, it's just, I think the fire stuff is really wild too, because it's like we tend to push more and more of these environmental regulations here in Colorado that are supposed to help us with climate control or climate change. Yet it seems like we continue to have more of these problems. And so, Ron Hanks, I was curious if you, like, I mean, is it possible that we are trying to fix the environment and we're trying to fix the climate so much that we're creating climate control? Like, it's just wild to me. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do, Lesley. And my dad was in two industries when I was a kid. He was in timber and nuclear power, and so I'm passionate about both of them. Uh, Timber, we're watching a policy change from the Forest Service and from BLM to where it's not so much management of timber harvest, it's more tearing up the logging roads and replanting them so that they can't be used for logging or for recreation or for fire control. And this has been going on, according to him, about since the late 60s at least. And so what we're seeing is every year we get a little bit more overgrowth, the underbrush. And I read today that it's a somewhat dated article, but that at that time, 10 years ago, we had 800 million standing dead trees due to the pine beetle. So right now we're in the billion mark or near a billion dead trees in the 24 million acres that the federal government owns. And those things are, they are strike anywhere matches ready to go. And we've got to be taking this down. And the idea of harvesting trees is a whole lot better than just wasting them as we're doing right now. And a friend of mine, a guy I respect on the water and forest management, made the case. He said, the Ute Indians used to do controlled burns back in the day, and I'd like to get into some conversation with them about it because we've got a high timber load per acre right now, and you're right, we're going backwards. We won't be able to get out of this probably for 10 years, but if we don't get started, it's going to get worse.
Well, and it
Wow.
seems like too, when it comes to Democrats and their policies, like I remember the day when Democrats wanted to preserve open space, right? And it's they're these environmentalists that constantly, I mean, they're the classic virtue signalers, but they constantly are like preaching like we can't go in and destroy we can't destroy the forest by cleaning them out and making them safer for doing fire mitigation because that's terrible. Like we can't touch our wilderness, but
Mhm.
let's then come in and take farmland and we'll just build house on top of house on top of house on top of house, apartments, condos, whatever we can do down there, that's fine. It's like these, I just, one of the, I mean, I think Democrats are hypocrites like across the board, but one of the ways that I find them the most hypocritical is actually when it comes to the environment. And it really is bothersome because I do feel like they do a lot of damage.
Well, I don't know if it's hypocritical or maybe it's a failure to fully understand the scale of things. The idea that we're coming in and harvesting, 100,000 board feet of timber out of an area and cutting some roads through it, which quickly grow back if we don't maintain them. I just don't think they fully understand the picture, and so that's why I think that we need to emphasize the fact that when we have these massive fires, it's killing everything. It's killing endangered species, and my brother had eagles out on the lake, the river that he runs on, and it's a hard time for him now to catch fish because it's all wide open and there's not the trees to perch on. And I mean, there's an argument to be made for, we're the supreme species here. We are the stewards of the land. I think most people manage it well, most farmers, most people grazing. And we would do better to have controlled maintenance rather than just watching it burn.
Well said for sure. Jason, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I do agree with Lesley when Democrats are super hypocritical when it comes to environmentalism. Obviously, we see it with the timber issue, the grazing issue. My district is in CD3, and my district is all in flames right now. My entire district is burning down right now, and it's sad, right? But what I can do as a citizen, what I did today, right, was go and spend a few $100s and go donate a ton of food and water to these firefighters, right? That's what we can do as good citizens, and I do hope that everyone else will do that and join me in that. But keep in mind that we're wasting money when we're having these policies backfire on us, when we do have the opportunity to produce, manufacture timber right here in Western Colorado, when we can open up BLM to grazing and have these farmers and ranchers explode in their agricultural industry and provide them the food instead of just burning it every single year. Then we're wasting money on sending these firefighters out here from the state and national level to come put out our fires here locally. And yes, fire districts become a whole different case as well, but they're also hypocritical when it comes to the wolves. They're saying we need wolves out here in Western Colorado because, well, pro-environment. Well, let me tell you what, your little wolves that you send out here is killing so many more livestock, so much more other animals that you probably care about or you just don't know because you're a one-size-fits-all policy individual. And the Democrats are crushing Colorado. They're crushing Western Slope, Colorado, because they ignore our needs. They ignore our wants. They ignore our voices. And I, they're pissed at me because I'm sitting here calling them out on their BS, but that's what it is. Democrats are the worst thing to happen to Colorado. And if we elect Democrats in our House races, and our Senate races, and the executive chamber, and at our federal level, we're going to continue to see Colorado deteriorate. And soon enough, we're going to turn into California or New York. And I refuse to be alive when that happens.
Well, awesome. We'll keep up the fight. And we got one of our strongest pro-liberty fighters in the state legislature here joining us, our special guest, Representative Ken deGraaf. Representative deGraaf, how are you, sir?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on. Sounds like it's a very interesting conversation. I think it all comes down to, when the outcome is obvious, the intent is inferred. So I have a hard time believing that the Democrats, the DSA, do not want Jared Polis, especially, do not want Colorado to burn down. When everything that has happened with policy is has a very predictable outcome. And these are things that, these are the type of things that we discuss when we're in session and say, this is the kind of stuff that's going to happen. And they do it anyways. And then it happens. So, yeah, I'd say this is, these wildfires, I consider them intentional on the part of the governor and the Democrat Party in general.
But Representative deGraaf, we all know it's climate change, a subject that you are the leading expert on in the legislature. And folks, if you haven't seen Rep deGraaf explain the baloney behind the whole green agenda here in Colorado, the country, and the world, it is one of the best joys to see at the well every time Rep deGraaf goes up there and just demolishes all the arguments out there. If you don't mind, Rep deGraaf, what's the little breakdown here of why it's not climate change?
Well, there is such thing as, the climate does change. There's a lot of drought. There's a lot of issues with grasslands, and because, like Jason was saying, we don't have enough grazing. But if you break it down and even use their consensus science, and you say, well, it's 100% carbon dioxide. Colorado makes 0.125 billion tons out of the 3,300 billion tons. So if you just do a quick ratio and say it's 100% of that 33 degrees Celsius, 0.125 divided by 3,300, it's 0.00125. So by their own consensus science BS, it is that is the absolute most Colorado could contribute to this green agenda would be point, and that would be if it was actually true. Carbon dioxide really doesn't have an impact on temperature. If you look at adiabatic, I'm not really sure how to pronounce that, but the compression that you get when with the air and the circulation, it's mostly from that. So yeah, the 0.00125 degrees Celsius would be maybe what you could do with carbon dioxide if Colorado spent trillions of dollars and went net zero.
So, Rep deGraaf, I have a question for you. I just asked Ron this. So, I am curious, just as somebody who doesn't really, I'm not a scientist. I don't dig into climate science or environmentalism. I try to do my part as just a good steward of the environment and being a good human. But it seems like to me, as somebody who watches the legislature very closely, and just all levels of government, that I feel like like just stepping back, the more policies, the more of these climate change policies that are passed, the worse our problems become in the states. The worse our environmental, the worse the fires are, the drought we're having this year. Although droughts happen cyclically. I was curious what your thoughts are on that. I mean, I don't know if I'm just like wearing a tinfoil hat half the time, and I'm like, why is it that it seems like every time we pass something new that's going to fix this, it actually gets worse?
Well, you're asking the people that made the problem to solve the problem, then you just get a bigger problem. But yeah, the Greeniacs or the Carbonistas, whatever, I like both. They are I agree with Jason again. They're the worst thing that for the environment. If you look at getting rid of grazing, our grasslands are made for grazing. That needs to happen in order to reestablish and improve the water cycle. If you look at where they have done holistic grazing, it improves the landscape, it improves the water retention, it improves the water cycle. CSU does a lot of research on that. So we have that resource right here, Savory Institute, that is in Boulder, was in Boulder. They do a lot of research on it. The wind and solar, I think, are kind of disasters for the climate. The turbines, they're finding that they actually they decrease the airflow, of course, because you're sucking energy out of it, but that can increase temperature. And then if you put black solar panels out over thousands of acres, that just absorbs energy, and that energy creates lift. That lift creates thunderstorms. Those thunderstorms create hail, and those hail turn solar panels into hazardous waste. So it's really a they want, I think, to paraphrase or maybe borrow from Thomas Sowell, they want to help the environment in the worst way, and that's exactly what they do.
Well, so I can take my tinfoil hat off then.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The environmentalists and the Democrats are the absolute worst thing for the environment. If in fact, if you look at it, if you go to the carbon CO2 coalition with Professor Happer and Dr. Lindzen, one is he does Dr. Happer does CO2 lasers, so he knows the thing about CO2. Dr. Lindzen is probably one of the most published people in climate and weather, and they both do the breakdown and carbon dioxide. The math for one half of one drop of in 20 Olympic-sized swimming pools full of drops is fully supported. That's your overall carbon footprint. So yeah, there's no impact from carbon dioxide. So when you look at using hydrocarbons for energy just break down into carbon dioxide and water. Both of those are tend to be very good for plants. And even if you count that, like if you look at the greening of the planet since the pre-industrial ice age, the planet, especially in desertified areas, has actually become greener because increased CO2 makes plants more drought resistant. So even the idea of getting rid of CO2, it being plant food in general, and also, it improves water retention for the plants. It improves growth. It improves all these things, and yet they have kids hopped up on misinformation that somehow CO2 is going to destroy the planet, when it's actually CO2 is the most green thing. It actually increases the green. So yeah, no tinfoil hat. They are crazy. They have absolutely no interest in the actual science. Because I think ultimately climate is an excuse for what they want to do. They want to exert control, and CO2 is what you breathe out, and it's money, and it's the green grift is what some of our budgets like CDOT has about $1.5 billion per year, and they spend about a third of that carbon dioxide mitigating strategies, which don't do anything. They haven't done anything. So we have roads that are crumbling because they are literally trying to, regulate the air you breathe.
Wow. Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. And Rep deGraaf, you brought up this idea of, the kids being convinced of the carbon dioxide and all of this. And, for so long, of course, I think everybody here would agree that it's so much of the schools and the left outreach to the children and trying to convince them and really terrorize them, right? I mean, we've heard stories, maybe not so much during this new Trump administration, but in the past where kids are crying and they're afraid and, oh my gosh, the world's going to end, all those pronouncements by Al Gore and Greta Thunberg and all the like saying, we got 5 years and the whole world's going to be destroyed. And these poor kids believe it, right? Because they're trusting the adults and they're being told these things. And I can't help but think of how much fear is used as a political tactic. So I'd love for anybody here to talk about how Democrats and maybe even some of the bad Republicans can kind of use fear to, whether it's take away our civil liberties, take away our taxes, take away our guns, and just that idea of how we need to kind of figure out how to combat that on some level. Any thoughts? Maybe jump over to Ron. What do you think?
Well, when you bring that up, Brandon, the first thing I think of is the Patriot Act and the FISA 702 and their ability to do warrantless wiretaps on us. And it goes back to that. I was an Arabic linguist. I was an Intel guy. I worked at NSA. And when I was there, we were very protective of American communications. We would stop what we would do by rule, by regulation, and not process any further. After 9/11, we have given the government so much latitude, and at one point I might have agreed, and actually I'll go farther than that. I did agree that we needed to know more of what was going on. We had a real disparity between domestic intelligence and international intelligence, the CIA and the NSA effort. And we needed to know what we were missing. But in the 20 something years since that's been passed, it has been nothing but consuming private information of Americans. And that to me is one of the worst offenses of this government. It's a weaponized government that's collecting data on us. And any of the candidates here can tell you, the idea that we have free speech is a little bit overrated when you realize Google requires that your EIN come in. And if you want to boost your advertising, well, your papers are not in order, so you're not going to be able to do it. So, there have been times at my cynical worst, Brandon, where I have thought they have us singing our national anthem, the land of the free, home of the brave, just to brainwash ourselves, and we have got to start getting our head around what this government is doing to us, because it's no longer what the government does for us. It is very much a weaponized and oppositional force.
110%, and Rep deGraaf, you were leading the fight in the legislature this year with House Bill 1037, Fourth Amendment's Not for Sale Act, and trying to do something about this, really. And Jason, we'll get to you in a second here, but I do have a question in the chat asking, can you ask Rep deGraaf about today's SCOTUS decision regarding, and I'm probably pronouncing this wrong, Chautry and third-party doctrine. So, if you haven't dug into that, Rep deGraaf, no pressure there. But from what I understand, it's this idea of this presumption of privacy when you're out in public. And to echo what Ron Hanks was saying, it's this idea of, you're being tracked, you're being monitored, and our government's surveilling and knowing everything we do. But it looks like the Supreme Court made a good decision today to kind of reinforce the idea that they have to get a warrant. They have to do what the 1037, the Fourth Amendment's Not for Sale Act, was trying to accomplish here in Colorado. So any thoughts on that, sir?
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm looking forward to reading it, but I was not aware of a SCOTUS decision on that. But yes, going back to your point, and then Ron's point about the Patriot Act, the fear mongering is real. When I presented the 1037, I got texts from DAs, and the DAs all were. I don't have to say any names. It was a unanimous holding against. So you can figure out the names out of unanimous. That they were all against it, and I got texts that said you need to get off this pro-criminal bill. I said, well, it's not a pro-criminal bill; it's a pro-citizen bill. It's protecting the citizens' rights to be secure in your person, property, and papers. And I think it's important to look back at, a lot of times we look at that and we say, well, the founders were concerned about Britain, right? That they were concerned about Britain, and that they're having their houses ransacked. But the Fourth Amendment wasn't part of our Constitution. We didn't have a Constitution until after we defeated Britain. So it was not the Fourth Amendment was not put in place to protect us from Britain. It was put in place to protect us from our own government. And so, but whenever anything would come up, they would say, well, we can't have this because what about this little girl that was kidnapped? We wouldn't be able to find her. And they did that with Zamo, with her bills of 070 and 071. Both scored very highly on constitutionalism, but the establishment is very much in favor of and in fact promoting Terry Carver over it in order to promote and protect that surveillance state over the rights of citizens. So they just break it all down to and some of those DAs, I know at least one of them had 50 pages of refused felony charges that the sheriff asked for felony charges, and the refusals fill up 50 pages. So when the DAs say, well, they're getting tough on crime because we really need to have, mass surveillance on you, and what all data is collected by you, by your phone and by your robot and by your Siri and by, your robot vacuum cleaner, all those things, but then at the same time, they decline felony charges that would actually get real criminals off the street. So they use they put fear in us and use that fear to further erode our rights, which is really reprehensible. And that is on both sides. That is on both sides of the aisle. Although, not all GOP are, but that it happens on both sides of the aisle.
Well, one of the things too on the 1037 bill, or just kind of the data privacy, we have this private big brother, right? We have all this whole private sector that does spy on us. It does collect data, and I know because I work in digital marketing, so like I understand that. One of the things that I just want to point out that I saw happen over and over again on 1037 was kind of this, like, that these people who had voted against it would deflect back, and they would say, well, I do think we need to rein in that problem, but we need to rein in the private sector. I'm not willing to rein in the government. But I will do it through the private sector. And to me, so like, I mean, I think it was, if I remember right, it was Ava Flanell that used that. She was the one that said, I had to vote no because we have to keep it for the police so that they can access it, and the DAs need it, and they need this. So I've decided, and I'm making a vow right now, that I'm going to rein in the private sector from collecting it in the first place. But I refuse to rein in the government, just the private sector. So what's the difference? Either way, she's willing to run legislation that is going to restrict the access to that. She just won't do it to the government. She'll do it to the private sector. And I thought that was really interesting as a way that I continue to see these candidates that tried to make excuses, or not candidates, elected officials that were making excuses for it, for why they wouldn't support it. They were like, the problem is the private sector in the first place shouldn't even be getting it. And I'm like, but your job as an elected official is actually to restrain the government, not to restrain the people.
Definitely. Yes, 100%.
Yeah. Can I jump in there? I agree 100%. that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Our job is to secure our job as legislators is to secure the rights of the citizens of Colorado, not to make the trains run on time. Now, if we're going to have trains, we should make sure they run on time, but that's not the first and foremost job. I did give Ava a bill that I'd been working on in advance because we had talked about that, and it's the idea of having a bailor-bailee or a bailment relationship, and there's been some work done on that but basically just saying that with a third-party doctrine, your data is not abandoned. The state effectively considers is that once you've given your data to a third party, like if I give my information to Brandon, even though I trust Brandon, I can't actually trust Brandon that he won't just go and publish it, right? Like he's got it in his hands and he could just go and throw it all over the internet, right? And so I'm trusting him not to do that. But the government says, you really can't trust Brandon. So we can take that information. So that's where it comes from. And the difference, I think, comes for within 5 minutes now that it's going to start giving you ads for that. But Google at this point, probably not far off, but right now Google can't arrest you. Google can't deprive you of life, or like they can't deprive you of your rights. They can, they can demonetize your podcast. They can, they can do a lot of stuff to you, but at this point they don't have the ability to throw you in jail. So there is a difference. So, like I said, there's a bill that I gave Ava a draft. There's other options. We'll see. Hopefully she'll run it. I'd be willing to work with her on that. Just Institute for Justice is very interested in it. There's lots of interest in that as well. It's a tough nut to crack, and the Fourth Amendment was a way to do it. Going and saying, well, you're going to take on the civil side is really a little bit of I think kind of a hedge, because if you go after the civil side, it's going to be more than law enforcement that rolls in. It's, the room is going to get very full of data, because data is big money. But law enforcement is also encouraging the collection of it. They can't say we will contract with you to collect this data, but they can kind of say, well, we can't ask you to collect this data, but if you did collect this data, we would buy it. And that's a very slippery slope. I've seen, I posted it the other day, an example of what's called a pattern of life, and that they just took all of the data that they can get on you through a subscription and formed a pattern of life that they could probably tell you better where you're going to be tomorrow than you have an idea of where you're going to be tomorrow.
Wow.
A quick comment, if I may, and I don't know how pressed for time we are, but Lesley, your comment made me think of the Five Eyes arrangement that intelligence agencies in the United States have with the UK, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. They call it the Five Eyes. And that's something else we got to watch, is the collection, not just from the third party and from our government, but that we as a government, or our weaponized government, tasks the UK to collect the data on us, and it's not that hard. And then they feed it across through intel sharing agreements. So I imagine we're all aware of that. I bring it up only because I think if we are going to get a handle on this, we have to make sure that that's part of the conversation as well, and part of the legislation.
Definitely. And Ron, would love to get back to you, especially about the kill switch and everything that Congress is doing and your opponent to not protect our privacy. But I did want to say Jason Bias, his laptop battery died. He was trying to say goodbye, but I wasn't able to. So he just wanted to say thank you to everybody, and I wish him good luck on his campaign. And then we also have Corey Blair from Break the Chains Media. Hope everybody knows Corey. Was hanging out with Corey most of the day on Saturday at the Rocky Mountain Voice Freedom Fest. Wonderful time there. and Corey does an amazing job on YouTube as well, talking about a lot of our local issues here in Colorado. So Corey, thanks for joining us.
Hey, I heard you guys talking about data privacy collection, and I just so happened to just jump in because I was like, I know that they're talking about this, so that's why I showed up. So thanks for having me, Brandon.
Definitely, definitely. Ron, do you just want to hit real quick on maybe the electric kill switch? Because I thought that was one of the most compelling things that when we talked on our interview, Jeff Hurd, that's a deal breaker for me. Like Jeff Hurd voted in favor of putting kill switches in cars. Like that's insane. But anything else people need to know about that, Ron, or any other issues with the Fourth Amendment, maybe at the federal level?
Well, I mean, where are we going with these government kill switches and their ability to use these flock cameras? And so now bureaucrats can decide whether or not you are allowed to drive, and they can couch it in all of the best terms out there. But bottom line, if you become an enemy of the weaponized state, they shut your car down, and yeah, Jeff Hurd, our F-graded conservative Republican out of CD3, voted for that. He's the only Republican congressman that voted for the kill switch. And, I'm offended. That is not an American mindset or position. It's not a Western state kind of a mindset. And I think it ought to cost him, and there's our inability. I think President Trump just signed a memorandum today about the right to repair our vehicles, and this isn't just automobiles, but like John Deere agricultural equipment has codes and lockouts on it, so that if something goes wrong on this machine, it goes into limp mode, and that's limp mode, and where it's going at just fractional speed, and you have to get a John Deere diagnostic on it and a technician to come out. And now that's been kicked back, but that's the way we were headed. And this kill switch seems like the roundhouse kick to get to the same place. So yeah, that should eliminate any conservative right off the top. That right there to me is the definition that you are not a conservative if the government has control over whether or not your car operates based off of a camera looking at you, the driver.
Just insanity. I mean, how are we at this point, right? I mean, how are we at this point? And I mean, it's kind of a rhetorical question because we know it's bad politicians pushing bad policy. I mean, that's what it comes down to, and that's why the elections are so important. That's why people need to do the research, find the right candidates, and all of that. Any other thoughts on this? Because I'd love, with everybody here, we have a great brain trust here, and I'd love to get some predictions about what's going to happen tomorrow. But any other thoughts on the conversation around the Fourth Amendment and our right to privacy, or anything else anybody wants to cover before we jump into? I'm going to do a shared screen. I'm going to show some of the candidates, and then I can kind of go around and see who everybody thinks is going to win if everybody's cool with that.
Yeah.
So
On the I was going
Everyone,
to jump
ready,
in
set,
on
go.
the okay. I guess Brandon, you can say who's talking. But the really, I think when you get into it with with the kill switches, you're being deprived of your liberty without due process. And I don't really understand how. I don't know if there's a lawsuit, if there's any lawsuits that are coming with that, or if we have to wait until it gets signed into law or something. But really, it's an example of being deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process. And you have an electronic sheriff with an electronic jury and an electronic judge with absolutely no accountability. So I don't understand how the kill switches won't be a constitutional violation. And I agree that anybody who voted for that is, I don't like the word conservative, but is certainly not a constitutionalist. And that's just a personal preference on the word conservative, but definitely not a constitutionalist.
Perfect. Lesley, you want to go next?
So what I wanted to say was, I think the Fourth Amendment is about to become very, very important. and very, very popular. So the Fourth Amendment has always like being a Fourth Amendment activist is like something that you really only heard of in like libertarian circles and stuff, and like kind of those, they seem like kind of like some of those screwball libertarians, if you know what I mean. But it was never really mainstream. But I think, and as somebody who's been defending the Second Amendment, for many, many years, and the First Amendment beyond that for even more years than I've been an activist for the Second, I think the Fourth Amendment is like the next Second Amendment. I think that there is space right now. I think people are hungry for it. People across the political spectrum don't like it. And I think there's a very big space for leaders within it to come out and say, like, it's okay to oppose this. It's okay to oppose flock cameras. It is okay to oppose citizen surveillance. It does not make us radical. It is normal. And I also think it's going to be a very, very important issue when we get to the general election in November, when we're trying to, when Republicans need to really pull in these unaffiliated voters to give them an issue, give them something to vote for. I actually think the Fourth Amendment might be it.
Well said. Well said. Corey, any thoughts on the Fourth Amendment fight?
Yeah, I would like to say that being very anti-flock, very anti-surveillance, I went to when Mike Johnston decided to undermine the Denver City Council and just said, whatever, we're gonna just put him in anyways. I went there and there was probably upwards of 1,000 people just from it was overflow room, right? And there, I mean, a majority of these people were progressive leftists. They were very hard-leaning leftists that use this. They have the same issues that we do, but they frame it in from an immigration perspective or from a survey, using the government. But at the end of the day, we have to step away from bias and understand that the surveillance and the capturing of our data is most paramount, and that is the problem. That is the crux of the issue. And just an addendum to that is we're seeing video games and consoles and different various technologies asking and supplying data. And I do believe that in the next, maybe half decade or so, we're going to see price marketing and price locking us out of various technologies or appliances or game consoles, for example. Everything becoming subscription based, everything becoming to agree to terms of service for owners, for quote unquote ownership of your consoles or your PCs or anything like that, because no one's going to be able to buy them. And that I think that they're going to start attacking the consumer market and then price locking us out, therefore succumbing to a reluctant violations of our Fourth Amendment.
Well, and
Yeah.
so to me, that begs a question of looking at policy, right? Looking at that through a policy lens. Is that something that would be the role of government to come in and say, you can't have these things in your terms of service?
Right.
Because I feel like when you're talking about these legislators who are like, well, we need to rein in the private data collection in the first place, is that the kind of places that they're going to be going? So just kind of food for thought.
Yeah.
I think the Fourth Amendment this is going to be huge moving forward as activists.
Yeah, it's the next fight. It's the new frontier for sure. If you don't mind, I'd love to see what people want to think. We have the big primary election tomorrow, and would love to hear everybody on the stream here. We got U.S. Senate. Any thoughts? Anybody? We can just go around the room here. Who do you think, Gonzalez or Hickenlooper, for U.S. Senate on the Democrat primary? Let's start with Ron there. Who do you think is going to win that one?
Okay, I'm going to caveat that I'm not paying as much attention to some of these races because I'm so head down in the cockpit looking at the instruments on mine. But I'd have to say Hickenlooper just because of the incumbency and the money and the experience.
Perfect. Let's go next. Representative deGraaf, what do you think? Hickenlooper or Gonzalez?
I've seen more on Hickenlooper, but again, not one I've been tracking. I've been more engaged in the Republican on the GOP on Republican fight.
Gotcha. Lesley, what do you think? You think Julie Gonzalez, the ex-DSA anti-Israel candidate, is going to pull an upset and defeat Hickenlooper tomorrow?
I don't think so.
Conquistadora.
I think Hickenlooper is going to win that one. And again, going back to looking at the unaffiliated vote and how hard unaffiliateds are breaking for, for that ballot. But again, it's that question: are the unaffiliateds moderates that are like, we got to keep Hickenlooper, or does it actually happen to be DSA? Are they like the non-Democrat unaffiliateds who just are so progressive that they're going to actually swing it for Gonzalez? I'm going to say I think it's Hickenlooper, but I do think there's that kind of question in there about who those unaffiliates are. So,
Corey, your thoughts?
Yeah, Senadora Gonzalez, I do believe that she has a vast majority support in the metro and along the Front Range as far as the population district. But when it comes to a statewide race, I do not think she has it. I think Hickenlooper has the money. I think Hickenlooper has the name recognition, and Gonzalez will not be getting a statewide seat. As much as I'd love to see her win that and then just make a fool of herself on the national level, that'd be great. No, I think Hickenlooper's got it because he's establishment. And real question is what's going to happen with Gonzalez once she loses? Where is she going to go from here?
Good question. Good question. So I think we have a pretty much of a consensus here. I think Hickenlooper will win for all the reasons everybody stated. Now, Congressional District 1, because it's Denver only, might be a little bit of a different story here, folks. Milat Kuros is the DSA anti-Israel. We've seen posts all over about they're knocking hundreds of thousands of doors for her, supposedly, and it's crazy. deGraaf, of course, is the name recognition, has the establishment money, and there's a lot of people in Denver who might be scared to support this young upstart socialist. I don't know. This one's a little bit more of a shakeup, but we got to remember we also have Wanda James, who's kind of a more left progressive tied to the marijuana industry there, who's going to potentially pull votes away from Milat. But I do think that Milat has a ton of momentum. Any thoughts, Ron Hanks? Any thoughts on Congressional District 1 here?
It's no, I don't know enough. I mean, I know the names and the players and the positions, but I'd just be wagging at this point. So I'm going to abstain on this one, I think.
Fair point. Representative deGraaf, any thoughts here on Congressional District 1? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I do see the DSA stepping away from some of its crazier ideas and trying to focus and pretend that they're focused on affordability and jobs and things like that, when their litmus test is really feticide and genital mutilation. But no, I haven't been following that one too closely.
All right, Lesley, any thoughts here? Do you think that we'll have an upset? Do you think the DSA will pull off what they did? Yeah.
I'm not gonna claim I've been following this race really closely, but I've been following it kind of from in the background. And so I actually think this could end up proving to be like an AOC situation. Do you remember when AOC won her primary? Ironically, that actually showed up in my Facebook memories today, and it was a question of were people voting for AOC, or were they voting against the person she was running for, who was had been there for 20 years? So I think that there's a possibility that we could see this. So there's something else too. So I actually just crunched some numbers on first-time voters on the these unaffiliateds, how many of them are voting in the primary for the very first time? And so just in Larimer County, for example, this is really interesting to me. So 45% of the unaffiliateds who are returning a Democrat ballot are voting for the very first time in a primary. Compared to 21% voting for the first time in a Republican primary. So I wanted to break that down because I was actually interested if there was a Victor Marks bump, and I had mentioned that earlier. So I did actually just break it down while we've been on this. And so it looks like the first-time primary voters are actually in the Democrat side. So is that big jump more? And if that's the case, then we could end up seeing Julie Gonzalez take it. We could end up seeing that flip in CD1 because, yeah, 45% just in Larimer County of unaffiliated voters voting the Democrat ballot are first-time primary voters. That's kind of insane, actually.
Wow. Total wild card here. Corey, what are your thoughts? Do you think the DSA contingent in Denver has a strong enough presence? Can they do what they did in New York a couple weeks ago?
I with the groundswell that we've seen in not just New York, but in California and arguably other cities across the country, I reluctantly might have to lean into that idea that Kiros might be taking it just because of the money, the passion and the money and the movement that's moving into this progressive movement. And even though DeGette has the name recognition, I think that there are young people, maybe low information voters who are taking their emotions to the ballot box. And I think that we will see something like that. She could be the mile high AOC.
And this brings up a bigger point too of something that I've been thinking about because on some level, and we've kind of somebody mentioned it earlier, but would it be better for Republicans to have far left DSA candidates on the November ballot? Or would it be better for, I mean, or is it the big picture, don't give them a foothold. Don't give them any momentum. They shouldn't win. They should be shut down in the Democratic primary so that people understand that there's a total rejection of that. And it gives the more moderate, we wouldn't call them moderate, but they think they are, the more moderate Democrats, the opportunity to say, see, we told you so. You guys are too crazy, too extreme. Come on, moderate your position. You can't be that far left out there. I don't know. Any thoughts? Any thoughts on that one, Ron Hanks?
Well, it's a slippery slope, isn't it? I mean, and it's all, I have to be candid. I wonder how much vote manipulation we're going to see in the primaries because, I've always wondered about their ability to switch name A for B and B for A. And are they going to do that in these primaries? And would they do it in all the races or just in races like this? So it depends who it is that's pulling the levers. From my perspective, I guess, it would be nice if the Republican Party were built and armed and ready to take on the DSA, but I don't think we are. I think we have so many internecine battles going on among ourselves that we'd be better off probably with the old regulars in there until we have a better, stronger party.
Great points. Very interesting. Representative deGraaf, what do you think? Do you think it'd be better for Republicans in Colorado on the November ballot to have far left extremists to compete against, or do you think it's we shouldn't even give them? It'd be better that they don't even get that far.
I would rather they don't get that far because that's an indication of where the voters are. I mean, if you get far left extremists on the ballot because of the primaries, then you have to look and say, I mean, outside of all of the election fraud issues, the that that's the way the Democrat Party is leaning. And then also you have the Democrat Party that is, your low information voters that are going to vote for whatever Democrat is on the ticket, no matter how suicidal that is for the economy. In the past, we've had that level, and it's like there's always some level of Republicans in the wings able to save the country from going over the edge, but that's fewer and farther between anymore. So I'd rather have a more sane contingent in there than so then you can have an actual discussion of ideas as opposed to the just the just the lunacy that is the ideological lunacy that is the DSA. And I think the DSA is really calling the shots across the board anyways. So you really just have your covert DSA and you have your overt DSA, but they are they're definitely I don't know any of the Democrats that are not abjectly socialist.
Right. Lesley, any thoughts there? Would you rather see do you want to see the DSA just totally lose tomorrow, or do you think could be beneficial somehow that if they win?
Well, so I think if you're looking through like a campaign strategy lens, and to me, that's kind of the way I look. I think policy wise, they suck, but they all suck, to be honest with you. So But so I think looking at it through like a campaign strategy lens, I think one of the things that we have to do as people who want to influence elections, in the ways that we do, is that we have to step back and we have to look at what is it that DSA is selling to people to make them support them. And to be truthfully honest with you, I actually think one of the main things that people are attracted to is the way that they act like they're the rebels, they're against the government, right? So it's actually this very this anti-government push that they're like, we've got to change it. It's bad. Government is bad. And, we've got to come in and we're going to be the cure for that. And the reason that they can sell that on people is because people are tired of the government's boot on their necks. And people are tired of it, the left, the middle, and the right. People are tired of the government boot. And that's what they're selling them is that they're going to take that government boot, but they've convinced them that they're the only way. And I feel like it's a failure too on the Republican side because the truth is Republicans are supposed to be living in government. They're supposed to be taking that boot off of their necks, but they're not, right? It's like pick your flavor of authoritarianism. Pick left or pick right because they both are authoritarians. And it would be interesting to see too if we actually did get some kind of pro-liberty Republicans elected, could they actually counter these DSA candidates? Because the truth is if you can get them to join on things like flock cameras and surveillance state and let's take the boot off of your neck, then you kind of allow some people who are being influenced by that to be influenced by another idea that isn't the same as DSA. So I think we really have to look at what DSA is selling to the voters. And if we were to use that to our advantage as Republicans or right-leaning activists or whatever, I actually think that you can be like, that's so extreme. We actually just want freedom. We want to sell you freedom. They want to sell you the opposite of freedom, but they're trying to tell you it's freedom. And I think until we look at that, we'll probably just continue to be in the mess that we're in. But maybe at some point, Republicans or right-leaning activists will actually tap into that and utilize it.
Interesting points. Before we jump to you, Corey, I just wanted to point out Greg Gutfield at the Rocky Mountain Voice Summit or Freedom Fest this weekend said very similar things, Lesley. He said you got to kind of remove that romantic, rebellious image that they have, right? They all think they're Che Guevara with their iPad or, iMacs or whatever, their Apple laptops and their $10 Starbucks and their Rolex. They think but if you remove that romantic kind of rebellious image, they kind of lose a lot of that allure. That's really what they're going for on some level. And then, I say Representative deGraaf kind of did some of that with his success he had this year, teaming up with Representative Bacon, Assistant Majority Leader Bacon, and some of the other Democrats who are willing to partner with more pro-liberty Republicans to challenge the status quo. And I think maybe that's a more vision for the future. And Rep. deGraaf's leading that fight down at the state capitol for sure. Corey, your thoughts here? Would you rather? You put your thumb up earlier. Do you think that maybe having the DSA winning could have some potential benefits?
So, initially, yes. When you hear it on the surface level, it does sound like, oh, if we get them a win, we give them the platform, and then they stumble and they fail because there is no process in which, like, what is the how, right? And I ask this is we can have all these conversations on what we want, but how will we achieve it? Right. So these DSA members and the Mondami types, I mean, we're seeing this unfold right now in New York. The how is really the biggest hurdle for these ideologues to overcome. And if we implement the better version of the how, if we explain to these DSA members and explain to these people who want less surveillance, who want these things, how will we implement that? And if we sell them on the better ideas of how, I think that's and the solution based thinking, right? And seeing that we want to implement something that is sustainable and it does allow for the government to be what was its intention, not the overbearing ruler and decision maker in our lives. And that's kind of where the DSA is leaning into is like these government grocery stores and government housing. It's like that is not a solution for less surveillance. Like how could you live in a government housing project or government grocery stores if you want less surveillance? You can't square that circle.
Good point. Good point. We definitely need more right-leaning or pro-liberty people to present that alternative vision, I think, as well. Perfect. But I'd love to, any other thoughts on this before I'd love to go back and hear what people have to say about some of the other races, if you don't mind.
So I was just going to say something to what Corey just said about, they want, the government grocery stores, and they want, they're like this thing that they're going to give me to these people that they're selling that on. That's freedom, right? That's freedom from life. The things that they hate about life, that's freedom to them. So in a way, they're using that to sell them freedom. And I actually think freedom is what they're after. They just don't understand what it is.
Yep.
Yeah, they want freedom from scarcity. They want the replicator on Star Trek to give them their Earl Grey tea whenever they need it and not have to work for it,
Yeah, exactly.
Rep deGraaf, what are your thoughts here?
Well, I think I agree. And I think this is where the Republican Party needs to get its values intact, right? When you speak about the values of a republic, that all men are created equal, endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that really does still resonate across the board. Those are the values that made us, that took us, by providence, took us, and to defeat the greatest empire in the world at that time. And and the party is quite often averse to that. Like in 1037, it was a deference to law enforcement and the DA saying, well, we're not going to have the tools that we need to go after crime. And I think that was one that I think that was a failure on the part of the GOP to not say, look, we at least need to have this conversation, and maybe we need to modify and clean up some stuff and make some changes so it's better. But we need to actually stand up for the values of our republic, as opposed to just the normal talking points, like jobs are very important, but I don't think you get the jobs back unless you focus on unless you're focused on the liberty aspect and restoring those rights and holding true to those values. So I think this is the Democrats that I've worked with, on day one, I told the minority leader that a couple of years ago, that I would be going in the direction of the Constitution. If that was with Democrats, then so be it. If it's against Republicans, or GOP, I should say, then so be it. By definition, of course, a Republican would be going in the direction of the Constitution. That's what now, not all GOPs are, but that's unfortunate, and we need more. But I think we need to, and I think that the GOP needs to get into the books a little bit and understand why we need to focus on those values and promoting those values, rather than saying, okay, we're low taxes and we're small government. Those are great things, but they flow out of supporting the values, they're not independent of those values.
Well said, sir. Definitely. I mean, it would be amazing if the Republican Party or Republican legislators like yourself were leading the charge, protecting our Fourth Amendment rights, the surveillance state, all the things that Lesley's talking about, that Corey's talking about, some of these people who are out there, and we say, oh yeah, these are the leaders, and this is where you need to go if you believe in these issues, is go to the Republican Party. But unfortunately, we're not quite there yet. But we're working on it.
We're just drifting further away, I feel like.
It can feel like that for sure, but I think there's still opportunity here. But just going back real quick here, we talked about U.S. Senate, talked about House District 1. I'm going to skip House District 2, even though there is a primary there, just because I don't, I think that one's such a strong district for the Democrats. We got U.S. House District 3. Of course, we got the great Ron Hanks here with us. He's got a proven pro-liberty record going against Democrat Light, Jeff Hurd. And then there's actually a Democrat primary too. Just because we're on this topic, Ron, anything we need to know either about the Democrat primary? Hopefully, people have gotten to know you by now, but just since we're on U.S. House District 3, would give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, this is the first time in my memory that the Democrat primary for CD3 is going to play into this quite a bit, I think. And I might have missed Leslie's comments on the unaffiliated, but we, from our own looking at it and from reading the leftist blogs, we've heard them say in years past the Republican ballot is gray and boring, but the Democrat ballot is full of possibilities. I don't think there's been a year where it's been more so than 2026. So we have the sense that unaffiliated that were voting in the Republican primary in 24 are now going to prioritize lining up the best candidate that most aligns with their political ideas. And Lesley, that I didn't get a chance to hear it, but I'm hoping that when it comes to your turn, will you confirm or reject my position on that? But bottom line, having a full Democrat ballot, I think, is going to purify the Republican vote, and I think that's going to help because where we always go light, where we always go soft Republican, is the petition on guys, and now he's a petition on as well as a 59 percenter, and anyway, that's I can't answer who's going to win it. I've seen up and downs on both of them. They seem evenly matched. They're from the same region there. I just don't know. But I'm glad that they're having a primary. And I tried to find them out on the campaign trail, but they had people representing them. That's as close as I got. So.
Definitely. And to go back to Lesley there, any thoughts there on how Democrats are more excited about or unaffiliateds are leaning Democrat or going Democrat this year, turning in more Democrat ballots? That's going to help out Ron Hanks, I would think. What do you think, Lesley?
I think it will. And I think especially when you're looking at a seat like CD3, which is a swing district, really, right? Like, so I think when you're looking at, like, if say we saw this in CD4, you might be like, well, all the unaffiliates are already Republicans. So like, it's probably not going to have as big of an impact. But you look at a seat like CD3, and when you're talking about, like, and the purifying is actually an interesting way to say it. I've been calling it a lean. I've been saying for a couple of months now that I thought the Republicans were going to have a very lean primary because the unaffiliateds who just vote in the most interesting primary are all choosing the Democrat primary. So I've been saying that for a couple of months, and it's interesting watching it kind of unfold and really in these like numbers real time. And in a race like yours in CD3, where really you are such a toss-up district as far as, Republican Democrats, that's going to be huge. And I think that will pull pretty much, it's going to pull all your kind of more moderate unaffiliateds are going to be going over there, which is then going to leave your very conservative Republicans to vote in CD3, which could, depending on what those votes actually look like, which this is going to be an interesting, no matter what, we're going to look at the way this turns out. And we might say, okay, turns out those Republicans are actually kind of squishy, but they just like to vote for Republicans. Or we might actually be like, wow, Colorado Republicans are very conservative. And I think in a case like yours, if we do see you come out and win that primary, that's going to tell us something huge about the state in general. Or if we see you lose, we'll kind of know too. So that's going to be interesting for sure. But yeah, I'm right there with you. So
One quick counterpoint, if I may. Now, Trump won CD3 by 10 points in 2024, and it's been called R plus 9. I've seen it R plus 7. But Trump won it by 10. Hurd won it by 5 in 24, hanging on for dear life onto Trump's coattails. And so that tells us something about Jeff Hurd's likability and the fact that he doesn't have unaffiliated coming in, I think favors the conservative candidate, which in this case is me. And we like our chances on where we are. But I just wanted to verify that Trump won by 10 in 2024. So I don't know if I call it swing yet, with all due respect.
well, I guess I was, yeah, but yeah, that's good to know. That's kind of different than we saw in and other, like I've been actually looking at presidential numbers compared to primary numbers in on the Front Range, and those are definitely like more people voted for Kamala and then turned around and voted for the Republicans down ticket. So if that happened kind of the opposite there, that's definitely very interesting because that tells you that Republicans don't want to vote for her. So, so that to me would say that you win that primary, maybe we could end up with somebody like you in DC fighting against the frickin', car thing. I mean, that would be very, very interesting. The domino effect that this could all have could be super interesting.
Definitely, this could be a big year, and I think, yeah, with with the opportunity here, with the interest that unaffiliateds are having in the Democrat ballot compared to the Republican, it definitely is going to help our more conservative candidates, as you pointed out, Lesley. And I think it's an incredible opportunity, really, all around, to get more pro-liberty candidates, what I would call them at least, through the primary and onto November. So very interesting. One of the big dynamics we're all going to be watching tomorrow night, that's for sure. Um, yeah, a lot of stuff can happen, and I'm very curious if I know people aren't paying attention to every single race here, but any thoughts here on Congressional District 8? You got little Manny Root now, the guy who voted to tax overtime in Colorado, the vegan who hates oil and gas, versus Shannon Byrd, the the wannabe Hillary Clinton, I guess, is one way to put it. Any thoughts there? What about you, Rep deGraaf? You served with both of these people. Any thoughts there on Manny Rootnell versus Shannon Byrd? And we won't hold you to it. I'm not writing this down or anything, but any thoughts?
I think Byrd is probably the better candidate. Manny going around with a with a cowboy hat, pretending to be a rancher or something like that. Manny Petty always comes to mind, and the seeing him with a rancher hat just it just kind of cracks me up. He's a nice guy, but his policies are, he's not really engaged. He doesn't really have he seemed to be very much just playing it safe, sitting in the background the entire session. So I'm not really sure what he's going on as far as his record goes, other than clearly trying to pretend that he's somebody he's not. So yeah, the rancher hat kind of cracks me up.
Yeah, he's got his rancher hat and his phony girlfriend there, definitely pretending to be a lot of things he's not, in my personal opinion there.
Does he have a Canadian girlfriend? Is that
Oh, I don't know. Just a a phony girlfriend in my mind. I'll leave it at that.
Brandon, real quick, if I can interject.
Go for it.
I served with Shannon Byrd in my time in the House, and I don't know where she stands in this political race, but I will say this. She was one of the few Democrats that was actually a decent human being to speak to, that did not have the automaton contempt, for me and the other Republicans. And so from that standpoint, I find, I'd be interested to see how this turns out. And all four of you probably know more, but she was a much better person than the rank and file Democrat we were dealing with like the minority leader during my tenure. So if her platform's gone nuts, I'd be interested to know that now.
No, you hit the nail on the head there, Ron. She's definitely been the more moderate. She did not vote to tax overtime. Now, of course, from our perspective, or at least my perspective, can't speak for anybody else, but from a pro-liberty perspective, she's is so bad. But at the same time, she's one of the people who started the Opportunity Caucus and tied into this whole One Main Street, which is spending $1 million to try and support their more moderate pro-business Democrats. That's all in quotes because I don't believe that that's what they really are. But nonetheless, she's part of that fight. So definitely a more moderated voice. And I think, the Manny Rootnell, Shannon Byrd fight, it's going to be indicative of the Gonzalez versus Hickenlooper and Milat Kuros versus Daggett. It's kind of that similar thing, where if we see it go one way or the other, it's going to tell us a lot. But Corey, what are your thoughts here on this one?
So I might go against the grain a little bit. I'm gonna say, based on everything we just said, Manny Manny is a he looks the part, right? And they've done studies on this, right? When you two random people and they do a man on the street thing and they ask people if this person, who would you vote for? Just random pictures, and um it comes back to the appeal and the surface level low information voters, and that's why he wears the hat. He looks the part to some of these low information voters who think that he's going to do something, and he is well spoken, even though he speaks like written the most ridiculous stuff. He plays that role very well to the Democrat base. But it also comes into a decision of like he is going for like he is trying to run for a different demographic of a region in Colorado. So this might actually play to the Republicans' favor if Manny wins. If Manny gets that seat through the primary, the Republican who would be Gabe Evans against Manny Rootnell. I mean, like that could be uh, almost. I would see that being a layup for Gabe, because of all of his failed policies as far as Manny goes. I mean, how can a rancher be a vegan? It makes no sense. But I do see that his cult of personality might pull him through the primary.
Yeah, good points there. And yeah, Manny Rootnell, I mean, he's a Hispanic, young, good-looking guy, and in the primary, that's going to count for a lot. We have a very strong Hispanic community, but it's just going to be who turns out to vote, I think. It's the older demographic might go for Shannon Byrd. They want that moderate voice, and then Manny Rootnell. But Lesley, I know your family's getting bombarded with the ads and the flyers and the mailers. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts there from talking to people in your community about this race?
So I live like smack in the middle of CD8, and I also have that in my home. I have myself a 46-year-old Republican. I've got my 27-year-old daughter's registered to vote here, and she's registered Republican. And then I have an 18-year-old unaffiliated. And I will tell you, my 18-year-old unaffiliated is getting bombarded with political mail. I haven't gotten a piece. I'm your highest propensity voter, 46-year-old woman, mom. I mean, all the things, right? I've not gotten a single piece of political mail this year, but every time I check the mail, there's flyers in there from IECs and PACs. I guess they're just PACs because they're federal, in support of Manny Rootnell. So there's all these different PACs we did some research into them. My kiddo and I actually sat down together and kind of looked into like who was sending these and who these groups are. But I like to, it's interesting talking to 18-year-olds because you're like, well, how does this make you feel? Like, who do you feel like you want to vote for, Shannon Byrd or Manny Rootnell? And like, why? And one of the things that she always says is like, well, more of the ads that come to the house, which there's tons of them, are actually positive for Manny Rootnell. And then you get these negative ones every now and again against Shannon Byrd that actually come from a different pack. It's kind of interesting. And then the ones against Shannon Byrd are all about ICE and how they're all about how she voted to, deport people. That's such a hot topic and it's very emotional. So it's kind of interesting talking to my kids about these flyers that are like literally coming, and we're actually going to vote in the morning. So I'm obviously voting the Republican ballot. Not sure what my kiddos doing, but it's been very interesting. And I do think that based on what I have seen, and I think assuming they actually can drive 18-year-olds out to vote, because that's the different part. You can drive a 60-year-old out to vote. You can bombard an 18-year-old with mail, but are they going to go out to vote? Probably if I wasn't going to do it too, we may not. But I do think, kind of based on what I'm seeing, I do think that there's a really good chance that Manny Rutinel is going to win. I have mixed feelings about that because, like Ron said, I actually think Shannon Byrd is very rational. She's very reasonable for a Democrat. And if I had to have somebody representing me, I would prefer her to Manny Rutinel without a doubt. But I actually think that a Manny Rutinel, Gabe Evans race, that Gabe would have the way upper hand in that. He would be the adult in the room against this child running in a district that's very rural. I mean, this is Weld County. This is up here where we are. I mean, outside of the North Denver piece of it, really, we're talking about a very rural area. So I think that, I think Manny's going to win it. I think Manny's probably easier to beat.
Can I just jump in on that really quick? And I'm obviously you kind of echoed me a little bit, but uh it's the turnout, right? We are in a midterm, and to the point that Ron made earlier about the Trump plus 10 and Hurd plus 5. uh most of these people that come out to vote come for the big ticket names and come for the general elections. We're walking into a midterm. You really got to get that conversion rate to get to the ballots. So like you said, Leslie, it's like you can send all the mail you want, you can see all the ads you want, but if they don't show up to drop a ballot, you're gonna get whoever gets the numbers at the end of the day. But I do think Manny's probably gonna be that guy.
And if he's not that guy, and we see Shannon Byrd win this race, we're going to know that they may be targeting this younger demographic, but that younger demographic isn't actually voting. So, which would be, to me, that's just information for us to use as we campaign going into November.
Very interesting. Yeah, it'd be very, very interesting to see. Well, what about the governor candidates there? Um, any thoughts there? I know, and I'm not saying who you would prefer to, well, you could approach this however you want. I mean, you guys say what you want, but I would say, who do you think's going to win? And that's my biggest question. Who's going to win tomorrow night? I still think it's going to be Bennett. I think the IEC spending, I mean, both of these people have already won statewide races, but I think Bennett's more of a known quantity. And I think just because of his establishment backing, I think he's got the better chance. But would love to hear what you have to say, Ron Hanks. What do you think? Weiser or
Yeah,
Bennett
I'm
winning tomorrow?
thinking Bennett as well.
Okay. Bennett on that one. Lesley, what about you? What do you think, Bennett or Weiser?
I actually have no idea in this race. I can't really get a pulse on it. I don't have a clue. I think nobody likes either of them. So depends on how many people just decide to throw something and try. But there's nobody that really is invested in either of these candidates.
Yeah,
So
good point. Good point. Corey, go for it.
yeah, I'm in the metro suburbs area, and I'll tell you right now that almost every other YouTube ad that I see is a pro Wiser, anti Bennett, and they're both coming from Democrat, or Democrat PACs and Democrat groups. And a lot of these ads, I mean, like, they got my data, right? They got my private data. They know who they're targeting. I'm a mid 30-year-old dad in the suburbs, right? But I, and Phil keeps talking about, they keep pushing the idea that it's all anti-Trump. This is the sad thing, is that every one of these races, it's all about who's going to hate Trump more, who's going to push back against the federal administration, who's the one going to be the thorn in their side. And they talk about Michael Bennett's voting record in the Senate, and they talk about Phil Weiser's the lawsuits that he has, right? I would say we might see a Wiser pull a primary win out of this, just because of this DSA creep, this leftist creep that we're seeing, especially up and down the Front Range of Fort Collins down to Colorado Springs. I mean, there is a lot of people that are going to come out for Wiser, just on the fact that he's almost 2 decades younger of Bennett, maybe. Just because he's younger, you're going to probably get people showing up for Wiser. Bennett is literally the guy from, Mr. The dude from South Park. He sounds like the guy that always, okay. He's that guy. No one wants Bennett as the governor. He seems like a weak person, a weak centered person as a Democrat. So I think Weiser's going to take it just because he's louder and more noxious, and it really comes down to like we're gonna have a fight for the governor race.
Very interesting. Rep deGraaf, any predictions here? Weiser or Bennett? Who's going to win tomorrow?
I think it's probably going to be Wiser. I think he's got I think he's obnoxious, and all he has is "I hate Trump." I do think I would hope that the ads about him, cozying up with all of the lawsuits that he has, all of basically taking bribes and selling the AG's office, which is basically what you can expect. And then if Jenna wins, it'll be absolute. Vindictiveness. But no, I think I agree. I think the younger, I think they're both terrible candidates, but I think they'll probably go with Weiser.
Very interesting. Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see for sure. And from my perspective, there's not a ton of difference between the two. It's just what interests are they going to be beholden to? And yeah, none of them are good here. Now, the Republican side, of course, and if people don't want to answer, you don't have to, or answer it however you want. But we got the old the lonely write-in candidate here. Kelvin came in Wimberly. I don't know why he even did this, just to be the write-in candidate. What's the point of that? But of course, three-way race here between Representative Scott Bottoms, Victor Marks, and Senator Kirkmeyer. Let's jump over to Lesley. Any thoughts here? Who's going to take it tomorrow?
So this race is going to be very interesting, especially when we look at like kind of the whole idea that the unaffiliateds are all voting the Democrat ticket. So we're looking at a very purified vote on this, right? Very lean as far as the actual Republican voters. I think there's so little interest in Scottums, Kirkmeyer and Scott Bottoms. There's very little interest, and I think I'm noticing that Bottoms is starting to really pick up steam as people are just not interested in Kirkmeyer. They're like, also Marks is kind of crazy, so let's get on the Scott Bottoms bandwagon. I think we could end up seeing this be a very close race between, honestly, the three of them. I personally I think Victor Marks is going to win. And I say that as somebody who really always tries to get out of my political echo chamber. I think it's what makes me a good messenger, is to get out of my political echo chamber and to listen and try to understand what kind of those real people, like what are my neighbors doing? Who are they going to vote for and why? And what are they learning and what are they hearing? Because it's nothing like what I hear. I mean, it's in my ear all day. They don't know anything. But when I start getting outside into that political echo chamber, it has blown my mind how many people who I've never seen be engaged in politics before are supporting, like they've become big Mark supporters. I think it's fascinating. How did he attract them? How did they find each other? What made them become engaged? Because whether you like Marks or don't like Marks, or he wins or he loses, I think there's something that can be learned from people on our side if we want to. We could learn something from that to not just for that race, but for everything that we're doing, because those people are there, and that's one of the things I've learned is that those people are out there, and somehow he's attracted them. That said, I'm planning on voting for Scott Bottoms.
Well said there. Let's jump over to Ron Hanks. Any predictions for the Republican governor candidate?
Yeah, it's a hard one. I can say this, in my efforts in the 27 counties of CD3, I've been at events with Scott Bottoms, 5 or 6 of them. I think Barb Kirkmeyer and I crossed over on one. In my efforts back, as a volunteer in the Republican Party and as a candidate, I guess I've listened to quite a few governor campaign stump speeches, and that would be Heidi Ganahl, Greg Lopez. I don't think I've heard a more what's the word I'm looking for? comprehensive platform explanation than from Scott Bottoms. Victor Marks is kind of, well, he's the invisible man as far as I'm concerned, as far as going to any locations. But, he's got that mysterious popularity that I don't know where it came from. And you're right, Lesley, we're going to have to study where this support came from because it really feels contrived, certainly at the beginning. But and I with Barb Kirkmeyer, I guess my thoughts on her are it wasn't one of her uh, mottos, "It's time," or something along those lines. Wasn't that it? I may be wrong, and I thought, that is that sounds kind of self-serving rather than any kind of visionary statement. So I kind of think Scott Bottoms might be the dark horse inside track winner on this.
Very interesting analysis there for sure. Let's jump over to Rep deGraaf. Any predictions for the Republican governor candidate tomorrow?
Well, I certainly don't have any predictions. The polling seems to be all over the place. I think your poll the other day was very interesting and hopefully telling. Scott has been covering the issues across the state. Uh, well, Victor has been avoiding the issues, but still has that cult of personality, which I guess it's just that it factor where it comes from, what it's based on. I don't know. I mean, I would like to have heard more of his thoughts on how he would be governor. As far as Barb goes, I think her record as far as being a Republican candidate, maybe a GOP candidate, but as far as being a Republican candidate is just not there. I'm still, I'd say I'm still a little salty about her trying to kill caucus and assembly, which with SB 23-101, I consider that to be at the foundational level of our representative republic. And, the effort to get rid of that, I think is, I mean, that's a deal breaker for me, just, in that regard. And then, when you look at when we criticize the governor, when we criticize the Democrats and say, like they're, spendthrifts and blowing through the $4 billion surplus, another $4 billion worth of debt, money borrowed out of the trust fund, et cetera. And then, it's difficult to condemn those things when, if we have a governor candidate who was instrumental in making, upwards of 80 to 90% of those bills bipartisan. When all of that debt is bipartisan, well, and then you see it. There's very little criticism a lot of times from the GOP when they recognize that they have been instrumental in ratcheting up that debt by even if it's just voting for bills that they know are going to pass anyways, it still makes them bipartisan, gives them that cover. So I'm hoping Scott. I agree with Ron. He's got he's got a very comprehensive. Uh, uh, he covers the issues comprehensively, and he has been in the legislature. He does know how that works. Barb's obviously been there longer, but doing the same thing for longer doesn't really give you a more breadth of experience. So hopefully Scott pulls this out.
Great points there. Any thought? What do you think, Corey?
Yeah. So I'm going to say it right now. Scott Bottoms is going to be the guy I vote for. Scott Bottoms has been out beating the pavement, talking to people, and he's been consistent on his messaging, and he's been uh, just very present in the arena. He's going to all these meet and greets. He's going to all these events. Victor is a no-show. To be fair, and then Kirkmeyer also has gone to some, but and I've met Kirkmeyer and Bottoms both in person, and Kirkmeyer was very nice and very friendly, but it's very disheartening to hear how she's been on these budget committees, or I don't know, you could correct me if I'm wrong, deGraaf, but she's been on budget committees and finance, and she's balanced the budgets in the state under in assembly, and somehow every year we're always underwater as a state. So how is that going to how is that going to be a right candidate to be a governor? So I just think Barb on her fiscal irresponsibility or fiscal explanations of her responsibility, I think that's a loss. Um, Victor Marks, he definitely has that cult of personality. He definitely has that appeal, and a lot of that is coming from out. He's got a lot of out of state money coming into our state, which I think is a big problem too. And Bottoms has the messaging. I really hope that people look at this and understand that if we need someone as principled as Bottoms, and I do think that Victor's strategy was to literally avoid debate, avoid primary discussions. He just thinks money's going to get him in and cult of personality is going to get him in. He just said, "Vote for me, and you'll find out my policy." And I just think that's a crazy platform to run on. He is no Trump. He never has had a history of politics outside of his storied past and the awkward long pauses on thoughts about if he unalived anyone. I just think it's absolutely ridiculous for anyone to vote for Marks. So I'm with Scott Bottoms, and I hope Scott Bottoms wins.
Rep deGraaf, you had a follow up there?
Yeah, just I do. I mean, not to try and defend, but on the JBC, it is a little bit. They are forced. Talking to Taggart, a lot of times they're forced to vote for bills that they don't necessarily like because it's something that the JBC passed in order to make the compromise, etc. So that there is that issue still, of voting for those in the end. I mean, they could go against them in principle. I'd say it's, probably more so the rest of the votes, the floor votes and all that drag the record down. I think, Barb is probably more of a, maybe pragmatic type Republican. And I think Scott is where you're going to get the values of the Republican. You're going to get somebody that's grounded in what the Constitution means, why the Constitution says, and the Declaration of Independence, and appreciation for that history, and an appreciation for the foundational values of that. So again, I'm putting my vote in for Scott, and I hope he pulls it out.
So another thing about Scott. So I agree with everything you guys said. So one of the things that I like about Scott is that I think that when it comes to his values, he values freedom, right? And so I think that freedom, I've thought this for so long, is that like if we really truly want to get voters to vote for us, we have to sell freedom. Like we're supposed to be the party of freedom. We're supposed to be the party of our constitutional rights and privacy rights and these things. And like Scott actually has that. He has the voting record to back that up. Like he's like, I vote for freedom. Like, but it's a matter of can we actually, is anybody capable of selling that in this state? Because I think that if there was any possibility for a Republican to win, they're going to have to be selling freedom to those people on the left that are just sick and tired of government.
Yeah, great point there. And I'm wondering how the vote's going to split. Scott Bottoms, obviously the grassroots conservative liberty candidate. Mark's the big moneyed, conservative candidate that appeals to some of the same voting base. Maybe the people who aren't as tuned in. If people who've been tuned into the legislature and really more of an insider, they know Rep Bottoms and his record, right? And then Kirkmeyer is kind of the different. It seems to me very different than those two in terms of that moderate kind of big government kind of voting record, and that's what we hear. And I'd love to hear people's opinions. Does Barb Kirkmeyer's moderate record make her more electable? I mean, and I know, Ron, I'm sure you have some thoughts on that because that's probably the same things you're hearing on your campaign, right? Where people say, well, Jeff Hurd, yeah, he's much more moderate, and that's what we need. That's what it's going to take to win blue Colorado. What are your thoughts there, Ron?
Yeah, I always reject the he's more electable. That's really more of an internal campaign spin, in my estimation, than it is any kind of point in fact. And I think it takes nothing more than going back to the comment I made to you and Lesley about Trump. Trump, as conservative as we perceive him to be, won CD3 by 10 points. Jeff Hurd could only win it by 5. Well, I'm at least as conservative as Trump, and my point is I want to, support Trump on this, and I think that's going to make me more valuable and therefore more electable. With this, he's not electable to me is just simple campaign spin, the of the junior staff. It doesn't hold water for me, but it works, I guess, because they keep bringing it back.
Yeah, that's their fallback, right? That's all they got to go on. What do you think, Rep. deGraaf? Do you think Kirkmeyer's moderate record makes her more electable? Do you think, because people, especially with Representative Bottoms, right? I mean, he's been great on the social conservative issues, and a lot of people think that it's going to hurt him statewide, whether you're talking about abortion or gay marriage or anything along those lines. What are your thoughts? Love to hear that.
Yeah, I think he's done a good job of linking the social conservative issues to the fiscal conservative issues. You have whatever 25-183 that basically gave unlimited funding for feticide in the state, not just for people of the state, but for anybody in the country and really anybody in the world. And putting Colorado on the hook for that. And I think he's gotten the message out pretty good. And you could have a Democrat Party that was actually fiscally sound and socially liberal, but they're not fiscally sound. They are, so I'm hoping that some people will start to have this link and understand that if they want somebody that is economically sound and has understands the economy, understands what built Colorado, understands how Colorado functions, and not just working in the Marxist ideology, then I think they're going to need to go with Scott. Now, I think also that individuals are, somebody's neither hot nor cold. They're lukewarm. They're tepid. It's that moderate is that squish feeling. And, people are tired of, it's always saying compromise, compromise, compromise. But I think people are also tired of legislators who are compromised, and that's where I think the compromise actually is. And when people that the electable mantra seems to always come out of the establishment. They have the money. I think overall they alienate the majority of the voters of the right. I think most anybody who's labeling themselves a Republican is actually a values type voter, where they value the values of our republic. And they have been leaving the party because the party does not when the GOP does not stand up for those Republican values. So I don't personally think that the squish candidates, the compromise candidates, I don't think they really attract the voter. They don't motivate them to socialist slow versus socialist fast doesn't necessarily motivate somebody to get up and make that decision. So I'm hoping that the people of Colorado have been, have tuned in and actually seen somebody who supports the values and understands the values. So that's what I'm hoping.
Interesting points there. What do you think, Corey? Is it going to take a moderate to win statewide in Colorado?
I'm gonna lead with this. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. You have to make sure that your objective moral reality is sound and infallible, and it is clearly defined. And I think moving into the next few cycles of politics, people want to have clearly defined positions from their politicians. And if you have a storied past of moderating and agree to get along, go along, get along behavior, we hear it a lot, but we are tired of that in Colorado. At least me personally. And if we want to make some moves and move that needle closer to liberty, you have to take stances that might not sound appealing to the majority, but or like the majority of the population, but it will get us to a position where the majority will start to understand why we keep holding these positions. And to Barb's, it's time. It's time. That is something literally. It must be on like the preface to Hillary Clinton's book or something. It literally sounds like something that you'd hear from Hillary Clinton. It's and not knocking her just because we've had many of female governors. I don't think it's a gender issue at all. I think that a good female candidates have a easily accessible path to the governorship. It's just the most recent thing that was brought up to my attention was her very interesting dealings with her land acquisitions with her friends and relatives. What was it, in 2012? I don't know the details, but I heard some shaky dealings about that, and that something like that. That's a dissuader for me for Kirkmeyer alone. Marx is Marx is someone who completely is off the radar when it comes to politics. And Scott's had a story has a past, and his last legislative session passed some really good stuff. And if he gets into a position where he actually makes some moves as governor, we can definitely see Colorado make a stand against this culture Marxist progressive creep globalism that we're seeing in not just Colorado but across the country.
Yeah, good points. Lesley, any thoughts? Because I know you're working with some candidates who are considered the more conservative candidates. So I'm wondering if you've heard anything from the opponents' camps, that we need somebody who's going to reach across the aisle, who's going to work with other people. And just because you're working with them doesn't make you bad. That's how you get things done. I mean, any response to that, especially on a statewide level?
Yeah, so I think, yeah, definitely looking at the state legislature, there's these, this Colorado Conservative Leadership Fund that has handpicked the most moderate people in the state that they can possibly try to back with, $250,000 and all. So I'm working with a couple of candidates who are actually dealing with them coming in and trying to defeat them. And it's interesting because looking at like kind of their opposition before this IEC came in and decided and started, trying to influence this election, and they're now speaking for these candidates. Prior to that, like the candidates, one of them is Anthony Hartsook, who's just, compromises the hell out of everything, including our gun rights. So, he's in my crosshairs. So he already does that. Compromise is literally his middle name, and it has been the whole time he's been in there. But then the other one we have over in is Nancy Rumfeld and Amy Parks over in HD 51 in Loveland. And I've actually known Nancy and Amy probably both about 15 years. I actually know both of these women very well, and I actually like both of them. But Nancy is the clear, very principled conservative in that race. And she's also not radical. That she's rational. She's liked on the school board. She actually has people who are like, I appreciate the fact that I don't agree with you necessarily, but you always stand on principle and you always explain why and you explain your votes and you're not afraid to vote no. Then her opponent, Amy Parks, is like coming out with, pictures of her shaking hands with Jared Polis, talking about how she's going to compromise when she goes to the Capitol. That's actually her campaign talking points. And, I mean, it's hard for me as somebody that's like, compromise has gotten us to hell. Like we have compromised our way to disaster in Colorado. And it's when I'm always like, we have authoritarians to the left of us and authoritarians to the right. Just pick your flavor, right? And when they compromise, you mix the flavors and you end up with just disaster. It's like, stop. Just stop compromising. Just stand on principle. Let them do their thing. You guys do your thing and maybe pass less bills. That would be a win. I do not understand this compromise mentality. And so when you look at somebody like Kirkmeyer, who's running on this again, if we just compromise, we will fix everything. No, compromise has ruined everything. Stop compromising. And I actually think that's what's pulling in a lot of the last minute support for Scott Bottoms is that people are like, I got to vote in this primary. I'm not voting for Victor Marks. Both Kirkmeyer and Bottoms have been in the legislature. And when I could vote for Bottoms, why would I vote for Kirkmeyer? I mean, when you think about it, and that's really what's happening, and that's people are voting for Scott because of it, from what I've seen. Do I think that we need somebody like Barb? I think Barb couldn't even beat Yadira Caraveo in CD8. Why would we think she could beat Michael Bennett in a statewide race? Absolutely not. Barb will, if Barb gets the nomination, she will lose so hard. Will Scott lose? Probably. Would Marks lose? Probably. But yeah, we don't need Barb.
The more that we compromise, the more the Overton window shifts. And that is the real like outcome of compromise, right? That's why you have to have the baseline of objective moral reality and politicians who stand by that.
Great point. I love that. That's something we definitely got to remember. But it's almost 11 o'clock at night. Got a big day tomorrow. I know everybody's going to be glued, after 7 p.m. glued to their phones or computers. And we got Ron Hanks still got his 1 day left on his campaign for the primary. Hopefully many more days left until November on his campaign. But as we wrap it up here, let's do some final thoughts here. Ron Hanks, you want to go first? What are some of your final thoughts for tonight?
Well, first off, I thought this was going to be 15 minutes, and it turned out to be the best hour and a half going. I really had a good time talking with all of you, and Jason, who's no longer with us here in the virtual sense. But no, we're looking to really been talking with friends and family, and we're tired of fighting Republicans. I'd like to take the battle to the Democrats now in the general, and we think we got a pretty good chance. Really enjoyed being on here, so thank you, Brandon, and thank you for what you're doing, and you, Corey, and Lesley. I haven't really listened to you talk before, but I'm very interested in it. So thank you for your expertise, and Ken, it goes without saying. So I'll stop with that.
Perfect. Well, good, sir. Thank you. Good luck tomorrow. Best wishes. We'll be watching intently your race there. So, give it, good luck. That's all I can really say there. Representative deGraaf, any final thoughts here as we wrap it up for tonight going into this June 30th primary?
Well, I think people are really interested. They're becoming more concerned about the direction of the state. Unfortunately, the party, the establishment squandered a great deal of opportunity with Britta. I think there was just a lot of time, and I don't know if that was intentional, if that was part of, killing that caucus and assembly, whether she was just in over her head. It's unfortunate. I mean, I was pulling for her. I wanted her to succeed. Because that was the success of the party. But I think we're seeing a great reason again for closing closing our primary and having this all in house, and making, and not to. Of course, libertarians, you can, and unaffiliated, they can affiliate. You affiliate if somebody fills out a Republican ballot, they are affiliating with the Republican Party. So they're not, the idea that people are restricted, it just doesn't fly. But look at all the time and effort that the Republicans have taken. The party has taken, GOP versus R, and the money that has been sunk into these races, hundreds of thousands of dollars, that is not even going to fight against the Democrat messaging system. And they have, and of course, the party that is actively trying to destroy the country, whether the candidates know it or not, they have a lot of foreign money that's being poured into them, across the board. So, the countries that are pouring money into them know that they just need to get these in. You need to get your conquistadora, senadora, elected, and she'll destroy the country from within. so again, it emphasizes the need of why we need to handle this internally. We need to handle it a process by ourselves. We need to stop being addicted to state money. If we're Republicans, after all, we should not be addicted to state money, and that addiction is what fuels the open primary. And we could have spent these last these months fighting against the socialist ideology instead of fighting internally. And I don't think we're necessarily fighting. I tell people we're not infighting, we're infiltrated, and I see that increasingly. I think it should be a battle of ideas, not a battle of outside money, influencing and pouring money into media. So I'm encouraged that people are starting to pay attention. But I'm afraid that we wasted time, too much time.
Mhm.
Yeah, good points there. Corey, we'll go to you next. Some closing thoughts here tonight.
Yeah, I think that however tomorrow shakes up is just the beginning of the bellwether that is November, right? And I think in the long run, we have to understand that there is a consistent pressure in Colorado and in other states to move us closer to globalism and to move us closer to this surveillance state, to move us closer into this dangerous water that is you'll own nothing and be happy, right? And understand that when you make your votes, when you follow candidates, when you look at these ballot initiatives, remember we have ballot initiatives in November that we have to make sure we get passed, the Protect Kids Colorado ballot initiatives and everything else. So with that being said, I think that there's we just need to get the information to the people, and these people need to be active and understand that Colorado is worth fighting for, as you always say, Brandon. I mean, we all here. I'm a native. We all love it, and we want to make sure that Colorado succeeds, and we move that needle closer to liberty, closer to freedom, and understand that it's not going to do it if we just stand around and just wait idly by. We have to get activated. We have to get local. We have to talk to our neighbors, and we have to understand that it's up to us. And we are the ones who determine how the government operates. So we have to make those decisions and be educated on those decisions. So yes, 100%. It's up to us.
Awesome. Good words, Corey. Definitely appreciate that. Lesley, what are your final thoughts tonight going into this crazy primary tomorrow?
I know. I think my final thoughts are, I'm me personally, I tend to just think strategically always about campaigns and politics. And I'm very interested to kind of see what happens tomorrow for a lot of different reasons on the left and the right. I think it's going to answer some questions that we've had, how influential are unaffiliated voters really in the Republican Party? If we find out tomorrow that those unaffiliated voters are actually very influential and they might be pissing off the Democrat Party right now, right? So like, what if they go in there and they get Julie Gonzalez and Manny Rutinel and all of them the nomination? You're going to have an establishment Democrat Party that's like, close these primaries. And then do we just join together and close the primaries? I mean, heck, maybe. So I think that's going to be interesting to watch and see kind of how that influence plays out. I'm really interested also to see, there's, obviously some of these grassroots Republican candidates in the House and Senate who have fought these campaigns being attacked, and, just what has happened with the Colorado Conservative Leadership Fund and the way that they have gone after these truly just good people. I think that's what bothers me the most, is that these candidates in these races where we have that IEC influence right now, they should have just been able to run fair fights and let that matter to their communities, and just let their communities decide. And the fact that this group that we now know is funded by some people who would like to call themselves allies to us, it's very gross. It's very, very gross. And I hope their influence is not as big as we think it is. or I shouldn't say as we think it is, as they think it is. But we're going to find out because I think they really also rely on more of the uninformed voters, like, unaffiliated, moderates, stuff like that. So I hope we have a very informed electorate that turns out for our Republicans, as far as that goes. But otherwise, I guess we just see where the pieces land and move on to November, which I think is going to be a whole other kind of nightmare that we're going to have, as far as like the Trump effect is going to be kind of influential here in Colorado. And I also, though, think that I hope Republicans moving into November can realize that freedom is a message that we can sell. And I just want us to sell freedom because I think that's people want that. They want the boot, they want the government boot off their neck, both the left and the right. And if Republicans could just figure out how to do that, they could win.
Well said. Well, my final thoughts, just appreciate everybody taking the time to join tonight. Wonderful panel, wonderful guests. We got to do this again. It was some of the most in-depth conversations about Colorado politics that I've seen. So much of the media is 30-second sound bites. These debates and candidate forums, they just go after them and attack them. There's no real discussion there. So I really appreciate the discussion we had tonight. Hope it was valuable and interesting to the viewers. The comments have been phenomenal tonight. Been having a blast interacting with everybody in the chat. So thank you, everybody who tuned in. Thank you, everybody in the chat. And yeah, let's do this again. And no matter what happens, there's going to be opportunity. We just got to look for it. We will be a free state. And just thank you, everybody. It's going to take all of us putting in the work to do it. And if we put in the work, each of us in our little corners of the state, we can make it happen. So thank you, everybody. Have a great night. We're less than an hour away to the June primary, June 30th. And then we'll be picking up the pieces wherever they fall. So thank you. Take care and best wishes to everybody. Have a great night.